Okay. Welcome, everybody. It is August 27th for our regular town council meeting. Sarah, roll call, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Zabriskie?
Here.
Mayor Pallavi?
Here.
Councilmember Klubstad?
Here.
And Councilmember Romack?
Here.
Thank you.
And if everybody would rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We'll move right into public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on items not on tonight's agenda. Please make sure you state your name for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes at my discretion. And under state law, council cannot take action on an item not on tonight's agenda, though we may choose to acknowledge, comment, or where appropriate, briefly answer a question, refer the matter to staff, or set the item for discussion at a future meeting. And make sure the green light is on when you speak. Take it away, Mr. Teixeira.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and staff. Ladies and gentlemen, for the record, my name is Steve Teixeira, resident of the town of Truckee. I'm here this evening on behalf of Truckee Citizens for Essential Services to announce that our website advocating for Measure E is up and running. It is yeson, O-N-E, for truckee.org. Thank you.
Is the for a number or F-O-R? It is a number. Okay. So yes on E
for
with the number 4, truckee.com.
.com or .org, whichever you prefer.
Got it. Thank you.
My name is Emily Cashin. I'm an RN who volunteered and got the contaminated drinking water system condemned at Donner Lake and rebuilt. Currently, I'm working on a Firewise program, traffic calming, and the West Street dilemma at the lake. I am mourning my 2-year-old Sophie, who was tragically and instantly killed in front of my home a week ago. For the sake of public safety, council put in pedestrian signs, crosswalks, a stop sign at the market to deal with the daily dangerous speeding before the child is killed. I represent Greenpoint property owners. The town signed a legally binding contract, Resolution 92-06, upon incorporation to take responsibility and provide services for all inherited county roads, storm drain facilities, including snow removal. West Street Avenue was accepted into county road system in 1924, reaffirmed in 1973, and in a 2023 Nevada grand jury report, and was inherited by the town, but has received no such services while owners pay taxes, which is against the law and possibly tax fraud. The town has willfully and maliciously for 21 years obstructed every public effort to recognize West Street as a public road, lying to utility companies, government agencies, and the public until petition forced the council to recognize this public road in 2019. I won't discuss Mr. Wilkins' 3 DUIs and hit and run convictions, but we pay him over $345,000 annually while he failed to enforce the town's encroachment permits in 2002 to restore the drainage ditches and under road culverts when he allowed Southwest Gas and the TDPUD to trench down Reed. He failed to require an encroachment permit for the grading of a road above Reed on the Montano property off Donner Lake Road. His wife represented the Montanos, and this lack of enforcement has caused profound drainage, erosion, and damage downhill onto private, public structures, as well as the pollution of Donner Lake. When the road entrance washed out due to a known Donner Lake Road problem, he refused to properly make repairs, rendering it dangerous to the public, a state violation. This is a dereliction of duty as a public works director. The town is in violation of the Clean Water Act and the Town Stormwater Management Program. The council and Attorney Morris deliberately and outright lied to the grand jury, falsely stating 3 times that Greenpoint owners have an HOA and are maintaining West Street. Now legal exposure is significant. With our taxes and the state 2017 Road Repair Accountability Act, fix the damaged road, restore the drainage ditches, and provide snow removal this winter, or could be very costly. We have asked the Nevada County District Attorney and State Attorney General to investigate these issues. Thank you. Is there any question?
Thanks, Emily. If there are, I'll take those. Appreciate your time. Any other public comment this evening? Seeing none. Excellent. We will close public comment and move on to our presentations for this evening. Looks like we have one being the town manager report.
Sorry about that. Good evening, everybody. Just two announcements quickly. First day back to school for everybody, so hope all of the kids had a great first day. And then also a reminder that we are closed on Monday for Labor Day, so please don't come to Town Hall on Monday if you're interested. Make that happen on Thursday or Tuesday. That's all I have.
Briefest town manager report yet. Thank you. That's all it. Any questions, comments from council on public comment or the town manager report? You're good? Yeah. You, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to express my condolences to Ms. Cashton and your husband for the loss of you.
Thank you. We will move into consent. We have 11 items on consent this evening. We have 6.1, minutes of August 13th, town council meeting. 6.2, contract authorization for Lieber Cassidy Whitmore Legal Services for 23-24 and 24-25. 6.3, adoption of the ordinance 2024-07 for 0.5% general sales tax measure to fund town essential services. 6.4, claim for damages against the town. 6.5, easement abandonment at 12678 Ski Slope Way. 6.6, accepting the quarter ended June 30th treasurer's report. 6.7, 2024 Highway Safety Improvement Program grant application for guardrail improvements. 6.8, authorization for a 3-year agreement with CDW for Microsoft. 6.9, appointment of Steve Thompson, Jennifer Stontiner, Troy Corliss, and Kelly Cutler and David Mason to the Public Art Commission. 6.10, the contract award to Evolution Industries for resurfacing of the Wash Bay floor. And 6.11, the Downtown Railroad Pedestrian Crossing Feasibility Study contract authorization. Would any member of council like to pull anything from consent?
I'd like to pull 6.3.
6.3, okay. And anything else? No? Staff?
Yes, we'd like to pull 6.10, please.
6.10, any member of the public? Yes?
I'd like to pull 6.7 and 6.11, please.
Okay. We have now broken the record for the most items pulled from consent. 6.7 and 6.11, you said?
That's correct.
Thank you. We will take all of those in the order in which they were received. Councilmember Henderson, start with 6.3, please.
Do you want me to make a motion to approve the other consent items
I'm sorry.
first?
Yes, that would be great. Thank
Okay.
you.
I move that we approve all of
Thank
the
you.
consent items with the exception of 6.3, 6.7, 6.10, and 6.11.
Correct. Yes.
I'll second.
Thank you. And all in favor of that?
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? No. Now we'll go back to Councilmember Henderson for item 6.3.
Thank you. I don't think it requires any further deliberation, really. I just, my position hasn't changed, so I would still vote no on this. So I don't have anything additional to add to the position I've articulated previously related to the measure.
Great. Any council questions on that? Opening public comment on 6.3. Seeing none, closing public comment. I need a motion on 6.3, please.
I'll move that we adopt ordinance 2024-07 for 0.5% general sales tax measure to fund town essential services.
I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed?
Opposed.
Great. 6.3 passes. Ms. Cashton, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium here, and we'll give you 3 minutes on item 6.7. And make sure we have 3 minutes on the, thanks, Sarah, on the clock.
My name is Emily Cashton. The town is asking for state money to replace 3 guardrails on Donner Lake Road while ignoring the outdated engineering involving that road that twice washed out the entrance and exit of West Street in 1986 and 2017. In a meeting to review the Shaw Engineering report with owners in 2004, Mr. Wilkins identified that the town owned Donner Lake Road and was aware of the drainage problems. He stated that if Greenpoint owners would set up an assessment district and assume West Reed, only then would he fix the engineering problems involving Donner Lake Road. No assessment district was set up. No action was taken by Mr. Wilkins to fix the drainage problems emanating from Donner Lake Road. The result, in 2017, the entrance exit of West Street was washed out, exposing utilities. On a site visit in the rain, Mr. Wilkins told the fire chief that the road was private and unmaintained, and the town had no responsibility. I, with other neighbors, were present, and I questioned Mr. Wilkins, who then stated it was a public, unmaintained road. The chief deemed that the road was unsafe and had to be temporarily repaired in order for owners to get their homes. Mr. Wilkins had shot rock dumped on the roadway. I appeared before the town council imploring them to require the road be repaired to its previous state of being paved. I got no response. The Truckee Sanitary District wrote that the repair that Mr. Wilkins did was only a temporary repair, and weather permitting, it should be repaired properly. Mr. Wilkins took no further action. After vehicle damage on several cars, the owners in desperation pulled out the shot rock, had the exposed utilities covered, and the road surface paved. Mr. Wilkins in many town council meetings has stated that because owners took control of the road, the town has no responsibility for the road. Mr. Wilkins and other employees of the town identified West Street in 2002 as a public right-of-way. You have taxpayers' monies and state funds. Now fix the problems with the outdated drainage engineering involving Donner Lake Road before West Street is washed out yet again, rather than replace guardrails that show no dents, warps, or sign of failure. Any questions?
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any questions or comments from council on item 6.7? Specifically? Good on this side. Open public comment on item 6.7.
Can I ask a question really
Yeah.
quickly? Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
I guess if just the town staff perspective, I know that the report says they're in need of upgrades, just aging infrastructure and some damage, but is there any more context or detail that you could provide?
Becky, do you want to take that? Becky has more detail on it than I do.
So these are guardrails that usually our Public Works road maintenance staff does repairs to on a regular basis. Some of these have gone to such disrepair that it's becoming more and more difficult to do the repairs. So they've been identified for replacement, and it just so happens that we have this opportunity with HSIP where they're set aside funds for guardrail replacement. So that's why we're putting this application in.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Thanks for
Can I
that clarification,
ask a
Becky.
Quick
Yeah,
question then
yeah,
too.
yeah.
So Becky, sorry. Yeah, the way the staff report reads and what I just heard you say, this funding is only available for guardrail replacement and not for other type of projects.
So yeah, the HSIP program has a lot of funding, but they have set-asides for specific things. So this is it's set aside for guardrails, so our chances are pretty good.
Great. And the town match, just to clarify for the record, is $93,250 out of $932,500. So pretty good value, I think we're getting back on that one. And it's just a grant application at the end of the day. Any further questions from council? Oh, yeah.
Just
go ahead.
following up on your
Sure.
question, so how did we arrive at the $93,250 number?
That's a requirement from the HSIP program. It's set by the federal government.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We good with our questions? Everybody's happy? Excellent. Any opening public comment on item 6.7? Seeing none, closing public comment on 6.7. Looking for a motion to move forward.
Yeah, I think if we're lucky enough to get this, we get to leverage more dollars, which will be of benefit. So I move that we approve what is our number? 6.7 2024 Highway Safety Improvement Program grant application for guardrail improvements.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, 6.7 passes. Thank you. We'll move on to 6.10. I believe that was a staff pull, so over to the staff table on this one.
Thank you, Mayor. Was 6.8 also pulled or no?
I do not have
Okay.
6.8.
Okay.
We're going to go to 6.11 after 6.10.
Okay, I apologize.
No problem.
The staff wanted to pull this because since the production of the staff report, we've found out a little bit of additional work we need to do associated with this item. And we would like to request that the council approve the town manager to enter into this contract. It's with Evolution Industries for an amount of $92,854.72 in lieu of the $89,593.65 that was in the staff report.
Great. So 92854.72.
Yes,
Excellent. Thank you. Anything to add?
that's it.
Thank you. Any council questions on this one?
It's a small change, but was it a mathematical error or just realizing more work needed to be done?
There was a little bit of additional work that was identified that needed to be completed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Opening public comment on 610. Seeing none. Closing public comment on 610. Bringing it back to council and reminding maybe Councilmember Romack our number is $92,854.72. If I could get a motion.
I make a motion that we award the contract to Evolution Industries for resurfacing of the wash bay floor for $92,000 and
$854.72.
954.
854.
854.72. Sorry, I didn't have a pen.
That's quite all
I'll
right.
second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, 610 moves forward. 611, again, Ms. Cashton, please feel free to take the podium. We'll reset the clock at 3 minutes, and we'd like to hear why you chose to pull 6.11.
Well, the town is recommending $345,000 to conduct a downtown railroad pedestrian crossing feasibility study. I question that while Donner Lake has primary and secondary residents and is a main attraction to tourists, in the 35 years I have lived there, why has the town taken absolutely no steps in putting in pedestrian signage, pedestrian crosswalks, or a stop sign at the market to render tourists and residents safe? Property owners pay taxes, and the tourists the lake attracts brings money to the town through STR rentals and tourists that spend money in town at restaurants and other businesses. The town has spent money all over town for beautiful crosswalks, pedestrian signs, flashing lights, stop signs, reduced speeds, but not a penny is allocated to the ignored stepchild, Donner Lake. Donner Lake is a tourist attraction, but is also largely a residential neighborhood. Anyone who lives here or who has stayed here can attest that when there's not a police presence, the vehicle speed this summer alone has well exceeded the posted 35 miles an hour per hour to averaging 50 to 60 plus speeds. The drivers this year have been particularly hostile to pedestrians crossing the street to homes or to the piers. This is just unsafe for the pedestrians and bike riders. There is no straight path for pedestrians who must walk around parked cars in parking spots with mostly no shoulder. And they take their lives in their hands stepping into the bike lane, as most cyclists are traveling at very fast speeds. I have come before the council as late as last meeting, and none of the council members at the agenda states for public comment choose to acknowledge the commitment or comment, or where appropriate, briefly answer a question, or refer the matter to staff to set the item for discussion at a future meeting. This simply reeks of a lack of caring for the safety of people at the lake, as well as a complete lack of transparency. I am again asking, as you allocate a huge sum for a study, consider a discussion on how this council can make it safer for the pedestrians at Donner Lake for a far less price. I was almost hit 3 times in this last month. I've talked to many people at Donner Lake, and they've also had similar experiences. Are we going to wait for somebody to be killed? I'd like this council to take some action on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Any questions specifically on item 6.11 for staff? We'll have obviously a chance to do budget and work plan stuff, and maybe that's a good time to address some of the things that Ms. Cashton brings up, but specifically tonight on 6.11. Any questions on this side?
Yeah, I believe the last time that this came up, we had identified an upcoming road safety update that we were going to receive. Is that accurate? Or am I recalling? We have the-
Active transportation plan, would that be in
Right.
place?
Right.
Yeah, so if there's, the active transportation plan is not in our immediate term work plan, but it is something in our medium term work plan. And those are, that would be the type of infrastructure that could be reviewed as a part of that.
And then, of course, reviewing during our capital improvement project.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions on this side? Go ahead, Councilmember Henderson first, and then we'll hear from you, Vice Mayor.
I just want to confirm / clarify, I guess, the $345,000 for the feasibility study, roughly just shy of 90% of that is from a grant that we were already awarded, correct?
Yes.
So we're using grant dollars that were specifically intended for this project and leveraging those and committing our 11.47% match, which is about $39,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the match again is a requirement of the grant,
Yes.
just as it was for item 6.7.
Yes.
And then the mayor pointed out that this is something we could address, Donner Lake safety, something we could address, but the town has addressed this in the past.
So as it relates to, so there's no sidewalks out on Donner Pass Road. The most recent significant work we did was to widen the road to install bike lanes out there. That was 10 plus years ago. And then to create wider shoulders in areas where there was space to do that. And that was, Donner Pass Road used to be 24 feet wide out there, now it's 32 feet wide. There was a major kind of roadway widening and drainage improvement and stormwater quality improvement project that the town implemented, again, a number of years ago out there. So that was the most recent major investment to improve safety and drainage out there.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
I would also add that we did the project in front of the state park where we built in a walkway behind and installed boulders and parking, parallel parking instead of directional parking. That was a pretty significant safety improvement, I thought.
Yeah, that was work we did primarily in-house with our public works crews, where we converted the dirt shoulder that folks used to use for angle parking, which encroached into the bike lane out there, into a paved, narrower shoulder with a row of boulders to basically require people to park in a parallel configuration. So it got the parking that was happening in the dirt relocated onto pavement and reconfigured it to parallel parking so that the parking ingress and egress from the spaces, the vehicle ingress and egress from the spaces, was happening in a way that was safer from a bicyclist standpoint.
Great. Thank you, staff. We'll open up 6.11 for any public comment. Come on up. Seeing none, closing public comment on 6.11 and looking for next steps or a motion from the council.
I'll say I think this is another opportunity where we get to leverage up $39,000 to $345,000. We already have the grant in hand. I think that's really exciting, and we'll see what comes out of the study. But I would move that we approve 7.11.
I'll second.
Yep. Councilmember Klosted. 611. We had Councilmember Henderson move, and Councilmember Klostad narrowly beat out Vice Mayor Zabriskie for the second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, 611 passes. Thank you very much. And with that, we will move into our discussion items. We have quite a few discussion items tonight, a ton of reports and things like that. So just want to be mindful of all of those. And we will start it off with the Community Development Annual Report. And hopefully, Chelsea, you can introduce yourself as it's your first presentation to council and to the greater town of Truckee population via a council meeting. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor and Town Council. My name is Chelsea Kreger. I'm with the Planning Division. Yes, and I am new here, so thank you for the introduction. I'm here to present to you the 2023 Annual Report from the Community Development Department. It is a report that you see annually, so if it looks familiar, that's because it is. The purpose of this report is to satisfy state requirements for reporting to the Office of Planning and Research, we call that OPR, and the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. It also serves to keep track of progress of general plan implementation, including the housing element, inform the community, inform decision makers, and the intent of this report is a high-level view of those things. For the past 2 years, the population of Truckee has declined by about 73 and 260 people, respectively, for those past 2 years. The 2023 estimated population of the town is 16,702 people. Nevada County and the state as a whole have also experienced decreases in population over this time period. Housing in Truckee, however, has continued to increase during this time to an estimated 13,713 housing units in 2023, which is an increase of 77 units from the year prior. In 2023, the vacancy rate in Truckee was 50.6, which has remained steady since 2020, and the persons per household is 2.45. Comparatively, Nevada County has a vacancy rate of 20.3 and 2.28 persons per household, and the state has a vacancy rate of only 6.4 and 2.77 persons per household. The substantially higher vacancy rate in the town when compared to the county and the state is indicative of a high rate of second home ownership. This graph shows residential building permit activity since 2010. The blue line represents finalized permits or completed permits, completed construction, and the green line represents issued permits, so projects beginning construction. 2023 experienced a dip in issued residential building permits compared to previous years, but final permits has remained fairly steady over that time. The projects listed here are detailed a little bit more in the paper report, or excuse me, the published report. And these projects are representative of residential units that are physically under constructions or were part of a larger project that hadn't yet reached completion in the year 2023. Not shown here would be smaller residential projects like single-family residential or ADUs. Again, this list has more detail in the published report. These residential projects are projects that are in an approved status in the year 2023. Doesn't necessarily mean that they were granted approval in the year 2023, but rather that they have valid entitlements and they have not yet pulled building permits to begin construction. Now, residential build-out is defined as the development of land to its full potential or theoretical capacity under land use designations. The 2040 general plan estimates that the residential build-out for Truckee is 19,318 dwelling units, which could theoretically accommodate up to a very maximum of 49,000 individual people. Similar to the list of residential projects, we have some non-residential projects that are also under construction. Here is a list of them, and for more detail, you can look to the published report. Not noted on this slide are that 2 of these projects do involve a small amount of demolition, and then the net total non-residential floor area that is under construction in 2023 was 172,436 square feet. And for non-residential projects that are in that approved status, again, not necessarily granted approval in 2023, but with valid entitlements and not currently under construction, are these projects listed here. None of these involve any demolition, so there's no net to account for, and just a total of 78,153 square feet of non-residential currently approved. The non-residential build-out is represented here, and the 2040 general plan estimates the non-residential build-out of the town to be approximately 4.13 million square feet. Town is currently at about 63.3% of that number, and upon completion of all non-residential floor area that's currently either under construction or in an approved status, that number would be at 69.3% of non-residential build-out. Now, the 2040 general plan obviously was adopted formally last year in 2023 in May. This was a really large undertaking. It took a lot of work since February 2018, a lot of work, time, input from the community, consultants, staff, and decision makers. So that is obviously a major thing to have happened in the year 2023. The Town Council adopted the 2019 to 2027 housing element in 2019 to ensure that the housing needs of all segments of the community can be met. Some of the programs associated with this in 2023 included the ADU program, first-time homebuyers program, lease to locals, Pacific Crest Commons, Truckee home access programs, and some quick facts from some of that. 41 ADU building permit applications were applied for in 2023. The Lease to Locals program helped to convert 158 residences to long-term rentals, which housed 368 Truckee residents as of December of 2023. And the THAP program helped to house 35 people and deed-restricted 13 homes in that year. As part of the 2040 General Plan update, a climate action plan was added to the general plan, showing the town's commitment to a more sustainable future. Some of the notable actions in this area include the creation of a sustainability committee, EV charging stations, litter mitigation, waste reduction, and some notable specifics. So those EV charges have provided electric fuel at Town Hall and the rail yard to avoid over 65 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions compared to gas-powered vehicles. Also in 2023, the town began work on the single-use plastic water bottle ordinance and began developing the bottle filling station grant program. The town continues to examine land use closely to make improvements to housing, economic development, sustainable mobility, quality of life. This resulted in updates to the downtown, expansions of trail systems, plans for increased open space and recreation areas, and always revisions to the town's development code to better reflect general plan policies, respond to community needs and wants, community goals, and state laws. The town also works to diversify transit opportunities to make travel more convenient, sustainable. This includes expanding pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, an e-bike share program, evaluating vehicle miles traveled for specific projects, and transit service expansion. The town is always working to maintain its culture while also experiencing growth, and it's a balance. The town was awarded a local early action planning grant to develop objective design standards for housing development projects. An ordinance was adopted in 2023, and that LEAP grant was closed also in 2023. Town also has an adopted public art master plan and continues with efforts to promote historic preservation through the Mills Act program. The town provides economic development program to increase the Truckee job and tax base, create and retain sustainable livable wage jobs, diversify the local economy, and promote Truckee as a great place to live, work, or visit. The town also partners with the Truckee Chamber of Commerce and has a new business program which is on the town's website. The town also continues to explore ways to make Truckee a safer place to live, work, and visit. The EOC continues to be prepared to support any town-related emergencies, and the town has also partnered with evacuation software company to model evacuation times, and the town also remains committed to improving egress and emergency vehicle ingress during evacuations. This concludes my presentation. Once again, my name is Chelsea, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Chelsea. Excellent first presentation. And I think just to clarify also the reason why you were going into safety and some of those other things is those are all parts of the general plan. Those are all some of the chapters, required parts of not just what you guys do in the community development department, but how the whole town works together.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, great. We appreciate that whole holistic view. Any council questions starting on my left? Great.
I do not have any. Thanks for answering a bunch of them in advance,
Yes.
staff.
Go ahead if you have some.
I have a couple. Great job, Chelsea. And I am I just want to thank staff for putting this. This one is particularly detailed and going to be a very helpful reference both for myself and for the community because it really consolidates a lot of facts in one place. So thank you for doing that. Just on the, and I don't know how detailed you have on some of this background information, but there was a dip in the decrease in housing from 2017 to 2018. But there seems to be some discrepancy in how the state is counting our housing units. So is that accounting for that? There was a comment in the staff report about or the document about we don't agree with the 27 units that we lost.
That's correct. We don't believe that we actually lost housing units during that time, but this information in the report is pulled straight from the state.
So that's why it's represented.
Yes.
And as we've talked before, this full build-out concept, 4,990 units, more units, that does not include things like SB9 splits or when we allow us ADU on an existing property or any of those types of intensifications of uses. Is that correct?
That number came from the general plan, and I'm not sure of those assumptions that were considered at that time.
Okay. That's fine.
It is correct, though. Yeah,
It is?
you're correct.
Okay. And also the ability that some sites just may not be able to be built on and stuff. So just for public education, that's kind of a throwing dart at a dartboard. We don't really know if that's the actual number that we're going to see. Okay, and then it talks about the sustainability committee and setting goals, and I know we've worked with N0. We've got the dashboard up and working. Is there another set of goals that we can anticipate coming from that? Because in many of the reports, it talks about the future goals, but not in particular, not that one. Just wondering if there was any elaboration on that. And I don't see Hillary.
I don't have any that I'm aware of,
Okay.
but of course the next year's annual report, maybe I will have some additional to add.
And then lastly, with the EV charging, at this point, we don't have a townwide master plan or kind of a vision for where the EV charging stations or hydrogen stations would go, right? We're in control of our own properties, but for the most part, we're just allowing private properties and developers to make their decisions based on building code requirements.
That's correct.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Henderson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor Zabriskie.
Yes, I have a few questions. On the slide of the building permit activity, is there any way of extracting from that information how many issued permits have not yet been finalized? You have a graph that shows total issued permits and then a graph that shows total finalized, and I guess that means certificate of occupancy. Is that right?
That's correct. That's what that means.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought maybe there would be some tracking of one after the other, but they look like two lines going in their own independent direction.
Not every building permit that gets issued may eventually get finalized or end up with a certificate of occupancy, so it
Of
can be a
course.
little bit more difficult to pull those exact numbers. We may be able to, but I don't know that it would be extremely meaningful.
Right, okay.
Councilmember Zabriskie, what we do in the building department is track on an annual basis permits that were created, permits that were issued, and permits that were finalized. So we look at it more holistically on an annual basis, but
Okay.
we do have that data.
Okay, thank you. And then there's, in the summary, it speaks to 61 single-family residential homes having been completed in the calendar year 2023, and it mentions multifamily units and 15 ADUs. But then farther down, there's a reference to 3 townhomes that were completed at Gray's Crossing. I'm wondering, can you tell me how many townhomes overall were built in 2023? And are there any other categories like duplexes that were built that aren't reflected here?
So in the annual report that I looked at to get that data, I did not see any multifamily that were for the year 2023. So that's exactly where that 61 was pulled from.
Yeah.
So I don't have a further breakdown right now. I may be able to get one.
Okay, so we don't know how many townhomes or duplexes were built in 2023,
I believe none were issued certificates of occupancy in 2023.
except for the 3 townhomes.
Except for those three. I'm sorry. Yes, except for those three.
3 in Grays, okay. And then next, I wanted to make sure I understand what we mean when we say mixed use. I had always thought that meant residential mixed with something else like commercial, but we do refer to the Truckee Tahoe Lumber Company as being a mixed use, non-residential. Is that a different, does that mean mixed use can also apply in a non-residential situation?
Yes, mixed use can also apply to a mix of uses that don't include residential.
Okay. And then there's a reference to the build-out population being 49,000. You referenced it again in your presentation, but this time you said it would accommodate 49,000 and some odd people. I provided some tables from both the general plan and the EIR, which actually show the population at build-out being estimated at around 22,000, which is substantially less than 49,000. Is there a way of correcting that in the community development report to more accurately reflect what we see in the general plan and EIR?
Sure, I can explain that. So the 49,000 refers to if every single property were developed to its very maximum possible capacity, everything was occupied to its very maximum capacity. That's that 49,000. The roughly 20,000 for the actual estimated population in the year 2040 is substantially different because we don't expect that every property in 2040 will be at the absolute maximum capacity.
Okay. In that case, can we change the text to make it obvious that we're not talking about build-out population, which would be the residents? We're talking about maximum capacity if all of the residential units were actually occupied by residents.
I can certainly make a note to make that more clear in upcoming reports.
Okay. And separately, I'd be happy to elaborate on why this is so important.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, I'm almost done, Mayor. Oh, thank you very much for the report. I, like Councilmember Klovstad, was impressed, and for me particularly, going through the report to get all that additional information out of the general plan policies and goals, to get a status on how we're progressing on these different items. That was very helpful. Can I get a little more detail, though, on what the plans are for the mobile homes to improve and protect mobile home parks under program 4.4? Because the staff report just said it's in the research phase, and I don't quite know what you're researching.
Yeah, so we do have a planner who is beginning to research what that might look like, but I don't have a really specific update for you at this time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Great. Thank you. No questions from me. We'll open public comment on 7.1. Any public comment on 7.1? Saw some twittering. No, you're good over there. He's chomping at the bit. Okay, we're going to close public comment on 7.1. We are here to just accept this report this evening, unless you have extremely specific edits that you would like to suggest. I would suggest that we accept the report and allow staff to make notes for future years if there are more specifics somebody wants to see. But other than that, look to my left first. If you have any additional comments you'd like to see added.
I just want to echo what Councilmember Clove said and Vice Mayor Zabriskie said. This is such a helpful report that I think is something that maybe people get lost in an agenda, but I think is something that is going to be very useful for us to be using when we're talking with residents and visitors and people who are just curious what's happening in town. So thank you to staff for putting it together.
Thank you. Councilmember Klofstad.
Yeah, one of the key aspects that I was glad to see included in this was our RENA calculation numbers. 755 units are required by us, by the state, to be built between 2019 and 2027. So we're around 350, 360 into that. And based on then the numbers that you provide on the developments that we can foresee, it looks like we're getting pretty close, and that's a big relief for those of us up here that have been through a few of those RENA approvals. So it's things like that I think are going to be very beneficial to the community and to us to be able to look at this, and it's a good marker point for where we are in different points of progression. So again, thank you very much. I hope the community enjoys this report as much as I did.
Councilmember Henderson.
I just want to say two things. One, I loved your presentation. Congratulations on your first one. You were so clear and concise, and your responses were just great. So thank you for joining the team and giving the presentation tonight. And then the other thing I wanted to say is 2023 was a really time and resource intensive year with the general plan, moving 2022 into 23. And so all of the successes that you highlighted, right, like housing 368 residents as of December of last year through long-term rental, all of those successes on top of also going through the process of the general plan and getting to final that with our community. I just really want to applaud the department because it was a hard year in a lot of ways. You should also be really, really proud of that year. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Zabriskie.
Yes, I'm fine accepting this report, subject to revising the residential build-out paragraph, so it's not saying that the projected population is 49,000. You can get to 49,000 another way, but it's not the projected population. And so I just would like to have it clarified.
You just want to clarify the projected full-time population is what you're getting at. Because the population could be 49,000 if everybody was living there. So you'd like to have something in there that clarifies that that 49,000 is based on a projected full-time population of 3 point whatever people per household.
I think it would be most valuable to have the projected population that appears in both the EIR and the general plan, which is around 21,000. I think that would be the most valuable for the community. And if you want to have a theoretical number for some reason, I don't know why, but I'm not opposed. I just want it to be more accurate.
So a little bit more editorial to specify those numbers or specificity on those numbers. Is that something staff's comfortable editing?
Yeah, we can add the clarification.
Great. Thank you.
As long as you're leaving that to staff's.
We are leaving it to staff.
You don't want it to come back.
We do. Well, I don't, but
Okay.
I'm only one.
Neither do I.
Okay.
So with that, Councilmember Henderson, would you like to make a motion? Or do you even need a motion? No, we're just approving it. I don't think we're just accepting it. So we're good.
You're good.
We're good. Great. Thank you. That satisfy you, Vice Mayor Zabriskie?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much, Chelsea. We will move on to, did I open public comment on that? I did. Yeah, I did. Never mind. 7.2, historic resource inventory redesignation request for 10108 Truckee Way. Laura, all yours.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Laura Dabe with the Planning Division. I'm here to talk with you tonight about a requested redesignation for a historic resource in our downtown. The resource is currently a Category B, which is a contributing resource, and the request is to change that to Category D, which is non-essential. The purpose of the redesignation would be to allow the structure to be demolished to facilitate future development on Parcel 1 of the Rail Yard Master Plan area. And in support of the redesignation request, the applicant hired Broadbent and Associates, which they are here tonight if you have any questions for them, to do a reevaluation of the structure. And we will talk about the current historic significance based on their report. So this is where the ancillary structure is located. You'll see where that star is there. This blue border here is Parcel 1 within the Rail Yard Master Plan. So it's actually outside the boundary of the historic district, which is a little unusual, but it is a resource that's identified in our historic resource inventory, which is why it required HPAC review and council action to change that designation. A little background on the project. This initially came to our Code Compliance Division's attention in March when we received some reports that the structure was in poor condition from the snow. So they reached out to the property owner. In April, we worked with them on shoring up the building in the short term so we could go through a process to figure out what the current historic significance was, make sure it didn't further degrade, and then address life safety issues. Like I said, they hired Broadbent to do a reevaluation. That was completed in June, and based on the findings of that report, the applicant submitted a historic design review application requesting the redesignation. In August, HPAC reviewed that information and forwarded a recommendation of approval to your council. So in our inventory, this is a photo from that was included in the 1998 record. It's identified as a garage that was an ancillary structure to the Methodist Church on the adjacent property, which is a Category B resource. The inventory identifies it as a related feature and as a detached garage that was assumed to have been constructed between 1925 to 1930. These are just a couple of photos to show the proximity of the structure to the church and also to the rail yard. So when Broadbent did its reevaluation, they identified that the garage was incorrectly identified with the Methodist Church, that also they don't believe it was constructed in 1925 to 1930. They traced the history of the site back to when the Central Pacific Railroad owned the property back to the 1960s. In 1909, the Catholic Church, that's now over on East Street, was actually moved to this site from near the railroad roundhouse. The garage structure wasn't depicted on any of the early maps, including the 1933 map. There was a photograph dating to the 1950s that showed it. That's the earliest photograph they were able to find. And they uncovered some anecdotal evidence that suggested that a priest at the Catholic Church used it as a vehicle garage between 1933 and 1949. The Catholic Church was moved in 1949 over to East Street in anticipation of the rerouting of US 40. And this just shows the location of the existing structure, the Methodist Church, and then the current location of the Catholic Church. So based on the information that the consultant discovered, they believe that the garage that's currently in the rail yard was not presently or historically associated with the Methodist Church. It might have at one point been related with the Catholic Church, but they were not able to confirm that association. And even if it had some historic association, they believe that was lost in 1949 when the church was moved and the accessory structure was not. So because it's within the rail yard master plan area outside the historic district, they didn't provide any recommendations for management recommendations on the structure that is partially collapsed at this point. And they prepared an updated form for the inventory that identifies their findings about the association. So if the council takes action to approve the redesignation, then that record would be updated. When HPAC reviewed this information on April 14th, they made a unanimous recommendation to approve the redesignation. So at the staff level, we believe that there's been sufficient documentation provided that supports the redesignation. And based on the documentation provided and HPAC's recommendation, we agree with the Category D redesignation request. So our recommendation tonight would be to adopt Resolution 2024-56, authorizing the redesignation of the ancillary garage to a Category D or non-essential resource. And I'm happy to take any questions. And as I mentioned, we also have Lauren from Broadbent if you have questions for her.
Thank you so much, Laura. Vice Mayor Zabriskie, any questions?
I look at that first picture, figure 2 of the garage, and I think, oh gosh, that looks nice. From that angle, everything looks great. And I wondered about whether we're losing the last tangible, visible embodiment of that period in our history. So that's why I asked, do we have any other examples of garages from this time period? I looked at the materials it's made out of. There's nothing exciting about the materials, that's for sure. But do we have other examples? Is there any interest anywhere about preserving an old one-car standalone garage? Or are we just going to eliminate these from our history?
Well, the Historic Preservation Program does require these types of structures to be maintained. So initially, when we started talking with the property owner, that was the direction we were going, is we need to fix this up, we need to comply with the program. But because they uncovered this additional information that shows that there's not historic significance to this particular building in relation to the adjacent church or the building that it potentially was associated with originally, that's why we support in this particular case the redesignation. But I would say in general, if there's an accessory structure and it still has some significance, we would recommend retaining that.
Okay. I realize garages are almost always accessories to something else, but so that means any standalone garage has lost all historical significance?
So the historic categorization is based on the whole property. So in this case, it was incorrectly identified as being part of the Methodist Church, which is why it was given the Category B rating to begin with. But if the findings of the Broadbent report had been that this was historically associated with the church, then that would have been a different conversation because it would retain historic significance potentially.
So it can't have independent significance?
I suppose there could be a case where it's the only remaining structure on the property, and then we would have to evaluate that and see if it still retains significance.
I think you're also potentially asking questions better asked of council than staff. I think, are you asking some opinionated questions of what's the significance versus some more factual things that Laura is really good at answering?
Well, but some of it I think also goes back to how the Historic Preservation District was established.
Totally.
And what criteria were used for that. So we were following the National Park District's guidelines. And with that comes sort of this whole slew of Secretary of the Interior standards that we're using. But I think fundamentally the question being raised is, as each one of these outbuildings goes away, regardless of what standards we have, does that change the fabric? And that's a question that the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission has struggled with since we've created the program.
And the mayor's correct. I think this is more deliberation now than questioning. Thank you. Yeah, those are all my questions.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Henderson, any specific questions?
I don't think I have any specific questions. The 196 pages of documentation probably answered most of them. But I will say there's incredible history within the appendices in the staff report. So just if anyone's interested in learning more about this, they talk about the steeple project and the preschool. And I mean, there's just incredible history contained within these documents. So I found that fascinating. Just a comment.
Excellent comment. Thank you. Councilmember Klofstad and Councilmember Romack, no questions from me. We'll open this up to public comment. Anybody have a public comment on this particular item? Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back for council deliberation. Vice Mayor Zabriskie, you set us up excellently with your opining via questioning. So if there's anything else you'd like to add, please feel free, and the rest of us will take it from there.
Yeah, I hope we do pursue this a little bit more. As Laura Day indicated, this is very much like endangered species. As we get fewer and fewer of them, they become more and more valuable, and then all of a sudden they disappear before you save any of them. So I don't think it's for us tonight, but I would like to see, I am hoping the HPAC or Historical Society puts more effort into trying to recommend, that certain elements of our history be preserved. We have a representative chronology in our buildings of our past.
Thank you. In general, you're fairly supportive of the recommendation in front of us.
I am.
Just to be also clear. Yeah. Councilmember Henderson?
I'm supportive of the recommended action.
Great. And any additional, Councilmember Klostad? And how about a motion, Councilmember Romack? Take it away.
I will motion that we adopt Resolution 2024-56, authorizing the redesignation of the ancillary garage at 10108 Truckee Way to a Category D non-essential resource.
And I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. Item 7.3, start making your way up here, Cindy. Don't hesitate. We have a fee schedule update. Public hearing, adopting resolution 2024-52, approving an inflationary adjustment additions and corrections to the townwide fee schedule.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Cindy Peterson here, and I will be presenting on the annual fee schedule. So the fee schedule comes annually, and it is really to recoup town costs for a variety of services. There's also punitive fees in there, as well as permit fees, license fees, a variety of fees for town services, and so we look at it annually. Departments look at it, and we apply a CPI, a Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index rate increase to it annually. So this year we look at the 12-month February to February increase rate, and that is the 2.4%. And so you can see over the past few years that 12-month rate has changed drastically, anywhere from a 1.6% to 5.3%, which was what that increase was last year. So this year is at 2.4%. So most of the fees will see that 2.4% increase. We have fees that will not increase. We have fees that increase based on federal regulatory increases. So every department will look at their fees and make changes to them accordingly. There will be fees that will be added. There will be fees that will be looked at and maybe just reworded. So every department will look through it, and there are quite a few fees. And so we kind of look through them as a fine-tooth comb, and we bring them to you annually. Notable changes that are brought to you this evening. A new fee tonight is a report generation fee, and it pertains to the building permit history reports, and that's to recoup staff costs to generate these reports. It does take staff time. They get pulled away from their normal day-to-day work, and it takes time to research and pull these reports. So the staff has implemented a report generation fee to recoup staff costs for that. Animal Services has listed 3 intact fees. They are not necessarily new fees, but they're new fees to the fee schedule. So Animal Services has added the fees to the schedule to align with the rest of their animal services fees. And so they will be reviewed annually and align with the town's fee schedule. Community development, the planning fees, there's 2 mitigation monitoring fees. They were a little confusing because one was a deposit and one was a fee. So they're reworded the fees so they're more clear and transparent when people are looking at the fee schedule. So rewording them to make it construction monitoring and one long-term mitigation monitoring. Parking, now that there's more opportunities for parking, there's the parking app and text to park. So customers now have the ability to see the different priority and value zones in our fee schedule. So then just kind of cleaning up some of that as well. Special events, community special events, we did have police service staff on the fee schedule, and we had an hourly rate for police to attend community events, and the hourly rate on there was lower than what staff costs were, so we were not recouping our costs. So staff recommended changing the wording of the fee so we would recoup our costs for the fully allocated hourly rate of the personnel. So kind of changing how we were recouping our costs with that fee. Also updating the special event permit application fees. The special event policy came to you back in April, kind of breaking out the tiers. So now we are aligning the fees to align with that policy. Short-term rentals, revamping the calculation of the fee so it would capture Truckee staff costs as well as the Truckee Fire Protection District costs. Sustainability brought a new fee to the schedule to replace lost or missing a 5-gallon insulated water dispenser or the mobile water filling station. So just kind of recoup those costs. And then an informational item that was brought also tonight is the solid waste. The rates were already brought to you back in June and were approved and have been effective in July 1st. What happened was the schedule just needed to be revamped and kind of reformatted, and some of the namings had changed. So it was just more of an informational item to, as it was revamped, to provide a clear representation of the rates. So nothing really changed on here, just kind of cleaned up how it looked in some of the language. If the rates are approved this evening, they will be effective on November 1st of 24. So staff's recommendation is to adopt the resolution 2024-52 approving inflationary adjustment, addition, modifications, and corrections to the town-wide fee schedule and charges for town services.
Thank you very much. Very concise. Appreciate you. Councilmember Henderson, any questions?
I'm just trying to find it. I think the building permit history fee is $30. Is that what's being proposed for that new fee? I'm trying to find it. I know it's, I just want to confirm.
I think it was more.
Report generation.
Yep.
It shows $30
Okay.
on page 371 of our staff report.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. That's it.
Vice Mayor Zabriskie.
Thank you. Pretty much all my questions were answered quite comprehensively, and appreciate that. I just want to make sure, so on the building and safety code violations, our building code section 1502.050 just needs to be amended to reflect what's in the fee schedule, which is based on state law, the amendment that was mentioned in the written response. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Councilmember Klistad. Romack. I have a quick question, going back again to the report generation fee. So at $30, and then in the question and answers, it was mentioned that members of the public can request one for free. So is that like an individual member of the public versus a company or a business?
No.
Is there a difference there?
They can request all permit documentation for free. It's when they want a summary of all the permits that have been issued that we have to go and pull each permit and provide a report that's been generated by the building department.
And
So
that's
they can do a public
different.
records request for just, can I get all permit documentation that was provided for this permit? Or they can say, can I just get a summary of all the permits with the dates that it was issued, date it was closed, and what the work was that was done. So that's work that's created by the building department, where we want to request a $30 fee.
Right. And I guess what my real question there is if it takes so much time, $30 is what, like 10 minutes of somebody's time? So are we actually recouping costs there? Or are we just adding a $30 fee for the sake of adding a $30 fee?
We had the admin department prepare a average of permit tech fees of 1 hour based on how long it actually takes them to prepare the report. It is about 10 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on how many permits have been issued.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Great. That was my question. With that, we'll open it up to public comment. Any member of the public have any comments on the updated fee schedule? Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back for any council deliberation. I'll hand it over to you, Councilmember Henderson, first.
I'm ready to make a motion. I don't have anything else to add.
I just want to point out, in response to some of the questions, there's a reference to future studies to be done. I'm happy to see that. It seems like we almost too often we need to update or rethink what our fee structure is, and even fines subject to the constraints of state law. I just want to say, I appreciate the staff's aware this needs to be done and has a schedule for doing it. The fee schedule is pretty formidable when I first looked at it.
Quite formidable.
It's a lot
Quite
of numbers.
Exhaustive.
It was very
And just to be clear, we're adding
Okay.
more.
True, right. Okay, thank you.
Anybody on this side have a comment on anything?
No, I think these are perfectly appropriate. We've seen them quite a few times in our time up here, and I really appreciate staff's attention to the detail and making sure that we are getting compensated for staff time and not overburdening taxpayers with other people's requests. So thank you.
Anything to add? Yeah. I'll just say I don't agree for the report generation fee for something that it admittedly takes 10 to 20 minutes just to tack on another fee. Feels like the paperwork to collect that fee and get the bill done and get an invoice done and collect the money and then deposit the money. And when we have to walk to town hall to give our credit card numbers, there's just a disconnect for me there in terms of how some of our fees are collected. So to me, a $30 fee it doesn't cover anything. I feel like we spend more money in tracking that $30 and how it gets all the way through the accounting department. So to me, I'm just one less fee adding to our list is sort of where I sit, just particularly on that one. But I'll let somebody else make a motion to move that forward.
Well, how frequently, like how often does that come up?
29 times in 2023,
29.
according to staff.
Well, do you want to open it up and ask staff questions on what you said?
No, I just don't agree with it. I asked my questions. It was very clear. I appreciate the response. I think it's very admirable to collect every cent we can for every service provided. I just don't agree that a $30 fee is going to make a difference in the world. And so, if this means somebody spends 10 to 20 minutes gathering a summary of building records, I'm fine with it. Like, I'm okay to let our staff spend 10 to 20 minutes to put that information together. And that's just a cost benefit analysis to me that I don't think is valuable for a $30 fee.
Maybe we can
That's all.
Maybe we can discuss it another time, because my
We
whole
certainly
frame of
can.
reference is from having to respond to public records requests and also making them, and we're very much constrained by state law. The idea is about providing access to the public, and that plays a role.
And we provide that for free. So the reality to me is, if somebody is smart enough to say, I'm going to do a public records request, then they get it for free. If they don't, they're going to pay $30. So it's a bit unequitable, actually, in my opinion, too.
Yeah, and state law allows for a way of recovering reasonable fees for additional costs.
Yeah,
but
I would be
it gets
okay with
complicated.
like adding a $150 fee. That
Instead
makes
of
sense.
30?
Yeah,
Okay.
30 to me is punitive
Okay,
and
let's-
is not worth our time to collect.
Let's make it
based on
100.
how we collect things. We are currently not able to take credit cards online for a lot of these fees. Parking, for example, right? So until we have a system that's more efficient, I'm not interested in adding $30 fees. I think it's more work than it's worth. That's all.
So you're not interested in adding 150? I thought you said.
I might be. Depends what it's for.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's all. But
We
feel free to make a
digress.
motion, and I mean, I would just move and remove that fee. That would just be my recommendation. But if the four of you want to adopt the package as a whole, then please do so.
Okay.
Can I ask some questions?
Sure. Diminishing returns already, yes.
Well, so it was 29 requests and
129.
129.
129. I misheard that. That's a whole different story. I feel like I'm supportive of moving forward. 129 seems like a fair bit, asking staff and recouping costs. 29, I was willing to consider. So I'm comfortable moving forward with everything as is.
How about a motion?
I will make a motion that we have already conducted our public hearing, so we adopt Resolution 2024-52, approving an inflationary adjustment, additions and corrections to the townwide fee schedule.
And I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Motion carries 4-1. Great. Thank you. With that, we're cruising right along, but now we have Alfred. So we're about to be stopped in our tracks, quite literally. What's that? And a really big report. That is correct. Are you guys okay to keep going and we'll take a break after this item? It's 6:20, yeah. Yeah. But you know Alfred over here, you know, Mr. Knotts, Transit Director, Transportation Program Manager. Item 7.4, Town of Truckee Short Range Transit Development Plan Update.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of Town Council. Good evening, Your Honor. Members of Town Council, Alfred Knotts, Transportation Program Manager with the town. Here to give you an update on the Short Range Transit Plan. So a Short Range Transit Plan is technically and statutorily a required document of the Nevada County Transportation Commission. That's because they are designated as the regional transportation planning agency. Typically, this is done for rural communities on behalf of them by the RTPA, the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, because a lot of times they don't have staff or the resources to do this. And also they are technically the administrators of Transportation Development Act funds as well. So this is a living, breathing document that's updated every 5 years, essentially, is typically what the useful life is. For example, things do change, things evolve. For example, our 2018 plan, which is technically the valid document as of right now, obviously didn't even contemplate microtransit at the time. So things changed drastically over those time periods. And what we did do during that time is we did do those supplemental microtransit studies and analysis in the pilot. That did feed directly into this document, just to show the relationship of what we have been doing and then how this is captured into the broader document. So the Short Range Transit Plan, again, is essentially a 5-year planning horizon. It does, it's not set in stone, so it does essentially lay out a guidelines, a roadmap, a blueprint, if you will, that can be deviated from a little bit, but not significantly or substantially. It does go into all of our grant applications to the Federal Transit Administration, to Caltrans, and also to NCTC to show that we, when we do request dollars or do plan different routes, that it is consistent with this plan and who we're trying to serve. So all that information is contained in the document itself. Trying to think if there's anything else of significance for you guys this evening. What we will do at the end of this is an update. So, and ultimately in September, NCTC, Nevada County Transportation Commission, will be the adopting agency as the RTPA, which is the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Then we will come back to council based on that for us to accept the document. So that's how that will work. And today we do have Genevieve here from LSC. This is, again, a document from Nevada County Transportation Commission. They are the contract holder also, so technically LSC has been contracted by Nevada County Transportation Commission. I will say that we've been hand in hand the whole time. Essentially, Nevada County said, this is your plan, make it happen, make it be what you want. Obviously, the public wants also, so we did have a lot of public process as well, and Genevieve will get into that. But with that, I will hand it over to Genevieve.
Thank you, Alfred. Good evening, Council. And Alfred, are you flipping through the... Excellent, thank you. Thanks for the great introduction. So our first step in a transit plan effort is to look at background conditions. We look at different demographic and economic factors that might impact how many people ride the bus and what might change over the next 5 years. So you know that we have about 17,000 people here in the town of Truckee, which is about 17% of the total Nevada County population. And I should note that technically in the past, this has always been considered an Eastern Nevada County transit plan, which essentially is the town of Truckee, but sometimes we do refer to this as an Eastern Nevada County plan. The population in Nevada County is not expected to grow from 2020 to 2030. However, in Truckee, it is expected to grow about 7% over those 10 years, which is a little less than about 1% a year, so not huge, but different than the county as a whole. One thing we like to look at, and you'll see in the report some graphics with lots of colors showing parts of the town that have greater transit need, and those are generally where folks who are low income, no vehicles available in their household, elderly folks, or disabled, where there's higher concentrations of these folks living. And the areas that pop out are Lower Sierra Meadows, southern downtown Truckee, and Central Glenshire. In fact, Central Glenshire has the most zero vehicle households in the town. I was actually a little surprised by that. The Nevada County population is aging, as most rural counties are, so that indicates that, in the future we need to continue to think about more specialized services, style ride, whatnot, that cater more to the older generation. One of the council comments was about our commute pattern data, and we did see an error in that. You probably saw our response, so that table has been changed. So the highlights here are, that there are a lot of people going in and out of Truckee for work. People live in Reno, people work in North Lake Tahoe, whatnot. So in fact, about 62% of employed Truckee residents commute outside of Truckee. This also includes remote workers. The data source the census has, includes areas such as Los Angeles. Obviously, people aren't commuting to Los Angeles on a daily basis. So, but it is the best source that we know of for commute patterns. The other direction, about 62% as well, of Truckee jobs are filled by employees living outside of Truckee. We can go to the next slide. This is just a brief overview tonight. I know you have a full agenda, but there is more information in the plan. So the services that we're covering are the local route. So that's the fixed route that runs on a fixed hourly schedule from Coldstream area to the west, Hennis Flat to the northeast, and now as far as Rayleigh's Soaring Way to the southeast. Some changes have been made recently to make the mobility hub our main transfer point versus the Truckee Depot. In the past, the west end of Donner Lake was served, but that was changed. It was a long distance to travel, and now with TART Connect and Dial-A-Ride also serving that area, it's a better use of resources to focus in the area that it is now. Dial-A-Ride, of course, serves the town of Truckee, and that's generally for folks who need a little extra assistance. Maybe this is our paratransit service. It will, which is the requirement to deviate within 3/4 of a mile of fixed route, but in this case, it serves the entire town. There's also some special event services for Truckee Thursdays, 4th of July, and of course, you're very familiar with the TART Connect pilot program. And we have a few graphs to give you some statistics. So the next part of the study is we look at all the operating data, the costs, the financial data, to try and get an idea of what's working well and historical trends. Here, the top line there is all of Placer TART services. So you see they have significant ridership. You can also see the drop from COVID there in 2021, but it has rebounded and then some. And the blue line is the Truckee local fixed route, which didn't really see a drop during COVID, which you're probably aware with, but significantly less ridership than Placer TART. And the gray is Dial Ride, which stays relatively constant, which makes sense. And if you can see, there's a little orange dot at 22-23, that's when TART Connect came into place. And you can see how much more that is than the other Truckee services. If we go to our next slide, this shows seasonal trends. So winter, November and December are big months for this particular year, fiscal year 22-23. And just as a reference point, the fixed route carries around 100 passenger trips per day and Dial Ride carries around 14. But then when you look at the next graph for Truckee TART Connect, we're carrying now or recently in peak times around 500 or more passenger trips per day. And you can see how Truckee Connect services have changed over the last couple of years. Of course, the program itself has changed. It hasn't always covered the entire town, and there's been some times when it hasn't, seasonally been available. But this gives you a trend of how it's caught on, basically. Our next slide, something that transit planners really like to look at is passenger trips per vehicle service hour and mile as well. So this is what we call productivity. And the Truckee TART Connect, you see, carries 5.6 passenger trips per hour, which is quite good for a demand response service because we're going to people's doors, curb to curb. Fixed routes traditionally are much more productive because it's so easy to group trips at different stops. And our fixed route here is still more than TART Connect, but not by all that much. And Dial Ride being 2.5 trips per hour, that's pretty standard for a demand response service, for a Dial Ride service. This graph here gives you a little indication of the split up of the costs of all the different services. And again, this is for fiscal year 22-23, and I know costs have increased since then. You can see that Truckee TART Connect obviously is a major part of the budget and major part of this pie graph here, with the Truckee fixed route and Dial Ride kind of similar proportions, but Truckee TART Connect is the most in the fixed route, and then Dial Ride, and then we have our special shuttles. But even though Truckee TART Connect is rather expensive, when you look at an operating cost per trip basis, TART Connect is $15 or $16 per trip versus fixed route services or more on the $30 range. So it's more cost efficient in that sense, although it does have a large price tag. And Dial Ride is usually a more expensive service because it's a specialized service. And our next graph here, this adds up all the services, fixed route, Dial Ride, and TART Connect all together just to show you the historical trend there. And you can see the big dip is when TART Connect didn't operate in October and November, but you can see the general upward trend. In the last year or so, fixed route ridership has actually gone down. A lot of those folks probably went to TART Connect. TART Connect ridership has gone up 124%, and Dial Ride ridership also went up just a little bit, 3%. So the next phase of the study is to look at what we call the alternatives evaluation. We look at a wide variety of options. How can we improve? How can we carry more riders? How can we be more cost efficient? Different types of services. What have the public indicated in surveys and pop-up workshops that we should look at? So I'm not going to go through all of these, but we separated our analysis for both fixed route services and microtransit services. We looked at increasing service, or can we, there's different contractors for fixed route and for the microtransit service. What if we one is more expensive than the other. Can we make some changes there? The TART Connect alternatives generally come from the microtransit study that you've seen before, and may have expanded on that a little bit. So, given all this information, talking with staff, we had a public workshop, online surveys. As you see in those figures, TART Connect has really increased ridership for the town of Truckee pretty significantly. It's a more effective operating cost per trip. It also serves the neighborhoods, which is something that the fixed route service we have does not do. In prior transit plan updates, there's been recommendations to have neighborhood shuttles, and that hadn't been implemented. TART Connect seems to be a way that meets that need better, and it's obviously responded well. Therefore, we think ideally it's a good use of resources to keep that program going. However, there is not money in our traditional transit budget to pay for this, as you know, and the town has been spending general fund money to continue this program. So ideally, the preferred scenario would be that a new recurring funding source, such as a sales tax, could be made available for Truckee TART Connect as is. However, we know that may not happen. So scenario B would be going back to basically what we've been doing in the past with our fixed route and dial ride services with a few changes. And we can go to the next few slides. I'll get into a couple more details here. So scenario A, the fixed route and dial ride would operate at current levels. We are recommending eliminating the general public fare for dial ride services. This is a very small amount, and it's more of a hassle than it's worth to account for that $1,500 a year. Continue special event shuttles. The North Star night service, if TART Connect has continued and that contractor has continued to be used, we think you could save a little money, increase ridership a little bit by having that be more of a hybrid microtransit service, where you would basically, along the Brockway corridor, it wouldn't be just set stops. There would be an area where people could, as the on-demand microtransit, request a ride, so we think that would increase ridership a little bit. The Truckee TART Connect will continue as is. However, we would recommend, as recommended in the microtransit study, that there's a minimum trip length of a half mile. This doesn't have a significant impact on ridership or cost. However, this is a good policy measure. We have heard through public input that a lot of people, maybe children, take this for short trips, and maybe that's taking up a van or vehicle that could be used for another longer trip. In total, this plan would cost you on the order of about $4.2 million a year, but it would carry 250,000 passenger trips. And so these are 24, 25 projected numbers. But scenario B would be fixed route and dial ride would continue as is. Special event shuttles continue as is. North Star night service would also continue as is because there would not be a microtransit contractor. The TART Connect pilot program would end after 24-25, and this would have the impact of reducing our budget down to $1.9 million after the TART Connect program is discontinued, but it would also decrease our ridership by about 80% or so to about 44,000. Even in scenario B, if you go to the next slide, we're still projected to have an operating deficit by the end years of the plan, up to about 387,000. And this is something that is common in rural transit agencies. We're getting to a point that operating costs are increasing and our revenues aren't really keeping up with it. So under scenario B, some sub-options of if a sales tax measure weren't to pass, other potential funding sources, other parking general fund revenue, SB 125, which you might be familiar with, is a funding source from the state that was originally tended to address this issue of commuter services in the larger cities aren't bringing in the same fare revenue, and operating costs are increasing with revenue is staying similar, and a lot of transit agencies would have to cut service unless there was additional funding. So there is potential for this SB 125 program to continue more into the future. However, it's unknown with the state budget as is. We also looked at, could there be any more money through, if you remember back in 2019, there was a transit funding equity study, which is the idea that TDA funds is our main source of public transit funding here in California and in Truckee. That comes from our sales tax. However, it's collected from the state, but then it's returned to the area based on population. And as you know, the Truckee population is, with our visitors, is really more, we're generating more sales tax than what was being brought back to us. And there was a formula developed to try and even that out with other funding sources. However, there's not much wiggle room in there either, unfortunately, enough to cover, say, the cost of the microtransit program. But we did look at that. Other thoughts, what could happen here is to limit the TART Connect service program. It is a great program, but perhaps it doesn't need to be at the scale it is. The options that popped up as seeming to have the best bang for their buck is limiting TART Connect to the downtown hospital, Sierra Meadows area here. We cover most of the transit-dependent folks except those in Glenshire. And that would drop your costs from, say 2.4 million to 1.4 million for the TART Connect program, and drop your ridership from, say, 172,000 trips to 78,000 trips a year. Another idea that's been brought up is establish a fare for TART Connect that would pay for part of the cost. The problem with this, of course, is hasn't been the goal, the policy of the town to charge for public transit as of late. When fares were discontinued, it had a great increase in ridership. There's equity factors to make sure that everybody can afford transportation. There are programs you can put in place that, low income, if you already qualify for some type of program, there could be some sort of identification card or process so that you are not charged the full $5 base fare. There's also thoughts of putting caps on the number of rides, free rides you can take. So maybe you get 4 free rides a day, and then after that, you're charged. It wouldn't give you quite the savings that we have listed here, but those are options that could be considered. So the last thing we have here is the capital plan. It's not just a service that we're looking at. We need to make sure we're maintaining our infrastructure and our vehicles over the next 5 years. So there's tables indicating the projects we need and how much it will cost. The town is in the process of working towards a zero-emission fleet as per state CARB requirements, not just recommendations, as well as replacing and acquiring a smaller dial-a-ride / microtransit fleet. There's also more plans for the rail yard mobility hub in terms of chargers, expansion at the town public service center, and in the long term, even with competitive funding, there's still a deficit of about $3 million with all of these plans. However, that's pretty common. You're always looking for new funding sources, capital grants to complete all of your large projects. So that is it in a nutshell. Of course, if there's any questions, and this is a draft plan, so comments will be incorporated into a final version brought forth to NCTC in September.
Thanks, Genevieve. You got anything to add, Mr. Knotts?
I guess I will say that the alternative, the way this plan's laid out, is I really like the way it's laid out. Typically, you have all these different alternatives, and it's a huge suite of menu of things, and it's hard to decipher. But in terms of scenario planning, which is done a lot of times in land use planning, about this happens and this happens and this happens, I think that's a very good way this plan's laid out with what we're talking about with different revenues and the pilot and everything. So it really gives us a roadmap for one direction or the other just based on our fiscal constraints.
Great, thank you. And just a quick question of clarification as we head into questions and then deliberation, Genevieve. Are you guys looking for comments, like in terms of editing? Is this sort of baked and this is how it's going to NCTC? Other than hearing and getting a great presentation on this plan tonight, is there something actionable that you're looking for from us?
I believe we're looking for comments, and NCTC is very curious what you all have to say. We have a meeting with them tomorrow to discuss this, so.
Great. Cool. Just wanted to clarify that. Appreciate your presentation. Well done. Really excellent report, too. Thank you. With that, we'll bring it to Councilmember Romack. Any questions?
Yes.
Go for it.
I've got a few. Really appreciate the report. Lots of great data. So thank you for that. First question, you just put up the capital plan. Would technology upgrades be something that we would include in a plan like this? And specifically, I noticed in the survey results, and I've heard from community members of our fixed route service lacks the real-time information that TART Connect does. So when a TART Connect's coming, you don't on our fixed route. So if it is something where in the next 5 years we'd be hoping to upgrade our technology for that, is this something we should be putting in this plan?
Yes. And historically, what we've done is we have had Next Bus technology, and that is the proprietary name. And we piggybacked off of essentially what Placer County has used, since we're kind of the smaller of the two fish. And so it would be something that we should identify in here, because it does go into grants and it does show that it is consistent with the plan if we can reference that. So, and we can probably write something in there that gives us that future leverage to capture that.
Great, thank you. And then timeline, we're doing this now because we have to hit a deadline with NCTC, is that correct?
I wouldn't say a hard deadline, but this is something that they would like the transit operator to do every 5 years, and we're to that 5-year point.
And I'm just asking that because we have a sales tax measure that would impact potentially if we're going with scenario A or B, but we need to get this done before we would have results in November. Is that, I know we have both in here. I could see, depending on how that goes, would we be thinking anything slightly differently?
I'm sure we could discuss that with NCTC if that was the desire of the commission, unless Alfred says otherwise.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that we could ask them to defer a little bit. It's not that we're going to go out of compliance or anything like that. It has been just a timeline that we've been trying to hit. But yes, that's something we could take back to them. It's not a hard and fast adoption. It's just that they meet every other month. And yeah, so it's something we can definitely talk to them.
Got it. Okay. And we can talk about that. There was a brief mention of a bunch of the different services, including the North Lake Tahoe Express, which is the airport shuttle. And I appreciate LSC provided comments of about 23% of visitors come through the airport, according to our chamber. Since that's kind of more regional and it's outside of our area, if we wanted to think about expanding that sort of service, is that something that should be in here? Or no, because it's more on a regional level?
We've thought of this as more town of Truckee services.
Okay, thank you. And then, there's discussion on the North Star shuttle. Olympic Valley night service was eliminated 2 years ago, I believe, due to low ridership. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was there any thought to looking at that for this plan now, or because we saw low ridership, just seemed like we should keep that out and just move forward with North Star?
The ridership was low enough, I want to say maybe at most 8 trips a night, that it wasn't cost effective. And so we didn't look at it further.
Okay. That would be something I would encourage council members. We can talk about more, but just with the changes we've seen in parking reservations at Palisades, and I pulled up, it's on page 41 in the report, and it shows, the Olympic Valley ridership did dip down, but there was also a year that North Star dipped down too, and then it went back up. So just food for thought on that. I think that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Great questions. So a really great report. Very interesting to see kind of where we've been. What I'm wondering is if, and maybe I missed it, but I would love to have some discussion in there, if it's appropriate, of where we want to go. What are our goals in terms of our fixed route service ridership, our TART Connect ridership? Because I think we've all been pretty shocked and surprised about how quickly that's TART Connect anyway has gone up. So question is that appropriate? Is that something that you anticipate including in this report at some point?
You mean as more like specific standards, like numeric quantitative standards, or more generic?
Because we're very clear in the report about what our population is, where we think it's going. And so can we use that data and this analysis on where our riders are coming from and where they're going to, and are they going to work, and how they're using it? Can we extrapolate kind of what is our max capacity of TART Connect and the fixed route service? And because I like to work towards goals, so is there a goal that we should be working towards is what I'm trying to understand.
Typically, yes, transit operators do have goals in this case, and we compare the alternatives to these standards. In this case, we compare it to status quo. TART Connect is, the more vehicles you provide, the more ridership you're going to get, but your costs going to go up. And it's not, there does come a point you could just expand it forever, and you would need to come up with more of like an operating, operating cost per trip standard. We could think a little bit about that, identify some more numeric performance standards, which would probably be fairly similar to status quo. I don't see that TART Connect ridership would increase too significantly, again, because it would cost more. And but there is some room for a little bit more grouping of trips, my understanding in the last year or so that has increased, and that would be how that ridership would increase on that service.
And that would be very interesting to have some sort of description of.
Okay.
Yeah. I was surprised that the school district did not show up as one of the large employers in our area. Are they not?
We just got another more recent data source on that, and I don't remember that in there, but I'll look at that more closely.
Okay.
Yes, Councilman Zabriskie actually pointed to some more recent data that our finance department and admin services present, so we will update that table and make sure that the school district is included in there also.
Okay, great. And then there's just a couple of weird descriptors in there, like the track at Truckee Donner Rec. That's intended to be the entire Truckee Donner Rec and Park District employee base, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that's a little confusing. And it's kind of a similar thing with the lodge at Tahoe Donner. That too is meant to be the Tahoe Donner HOA and all of their employees, correct?
I guess I would defer to the data sources to LSC, but we will make sure that it's accurately reflected.
Because I don't think the lodge is employing 200 people. So, yeah. Okay, that's it. Just great information. Thank you.
Councilmember Henderson.
I think my only additional question is there any, you talked about how TART Connect is more cost effective when you showed the graph, sort of dollars per rider. Is there any scenario in which you'd recommend diverting some amount of resources from the fixed service to TART Connect, and sort of why or why not?
We did look at a scenario where you just get rid of the fixed route. And the overall program would be less. You'd have to add a couple more vehicles. The downside of that is there are folks who really do appreciate fixed route service. They have to go to work. They want to know that the bus is going to come at a certain time. TART Connect, you might have 30-minute more weight. So I believe there is a need to still have a fixed route, and especially the fact that it's carrying 6.5 passenger trips per hour. If you got down to maybe 2 or 3 passenger trips per hour in the fixed route, then maybe that's where that should be considered.
Thanks for the explanation.
Go ahead.
Could you take a quick look at figure 6, Alfred, or figure 5? No, 6. It's, yeah, the figure. It's
Is
going
the
to
figure
be-
6 in the report?
Yeah,
Let's see.
it's, get the heading now.
Page 12 of the report.
Thank you.
Is that on our slide? May not be on the slide.
I didn't see it on the
It's not in
slides.
the slide.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You found, yes, I think I know what you're going to say.
did you already catch that?
Yes, yes, thank you.
So do you need to replace the map?
Yes, the map is, I believe, still the one with the disability map.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then we just talked about the employers, and it sounds like Councilmember Klofstad pretty much caught everything. I think Clear Capital cleared out a while ago. I'm surprised they're in there, and the way the grouping is with both Tahoe, Donner, and the hospital seems odd. The material I sent you, Alfred, was an older financial report. There should be a more recent annual report. And my understanding is our administrative department does actually call and get data, so it might be more reliable than this others. One of the things that's of greatest concern to me is the number of participants in the TART Connect program. Are we seeing an increase in participants along with the increase in ridership? Or are we seeing increasing use by a fraction of the ridership? Is our increasing ridership due to the fact that a certain group of people are using TART Connect more often? Or are we seeing more participants? And if there was an answer to a question to the effect that 60% of participants had ridden TART 3 to 7 times over the last 7 days, that certainly tends to confirm that certain people use it much more frequently than others. But the reason it's of interest to me is in terms of public support for TART Connect. If they only get the indirect benefit of having more parking spaces available for themselves, less congestion on the street, less pavement in town, that may not be enough for them to support continuation of TART Connect, or this council for that matter. But if there's widespread use, if everyone is directly using it, that indicates much wider community support. So with all of that preamble, is there a way of identifying the change in the number of participants month to month using TART Connect?
There would be. It would come from the operator from Downtowner, and we'd have to pull that information. But there is a way to pull that from, how long somebody's registered, how often they use it, and who's a new participant, as you said. So yes, we could pull that information.
Okay. Do you think that would be of value? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And then on table 2, is that the population projection for 2040 is 21,000?
Table 2. What about that?
Yeah.
Table 2 is that population projection for 2040, 21,000?
That's what we have, yes.
And
From the
then-
general plan.
Okay.
Looks like.
Thank you. And then, there's talking about eliminating the general public fare for the dial-a-ride. Is that then going to generate more costs? Is it going to generate more use of dial-a-ride, increasing the cost of it too?
I doubt that. I think most people who want, at this time, who want an on-demand or more of a curb-to-curb service, they call TART Connect. Dial-a-ride is generally discounted riders, so I don't think it would have a huge impact, no.
Okay, and then finally, following up on Councilmember Romac's question, could we also, if we went ahead with the plan, submitted it to the Transportation Commission, asked them to bless it and send it back, could we then amend it after Election Day? Would that be an option?
Yes, you definitely can amend it. It's a living, breathing document, so it can be amended.
Okay.
Yes.
Living, breathing document all in there. Thanks.
Maybe not breathing.
It's not a static document that's set in stone. It can be amended, yes. And usually very administratively or to the council.
Thank you. Just one, again, addition to Councilmember Romac's comments. I know you said Town of Truckee transit, but furthering your airport discussion, specifically Reno Tahoe Airport, you know, I would think it would be important to put something like that in a plan like this. If we're talking about North Star and Palisades, to me, the Reno Tahoe Airport would be a similar type of concept, and just because it's regional, all of TART is regional. So I guess what would prevent us, or why wouldn't we want to include at least mention of a long-term goal to create our own airport shuttle within Reno? Is there a detriment to adding something like that?
It's something that could be considered. You're thinking something separate from North Lake Tahoe Express.
Maybe. I don't know.
And that's how it could be captured under our existing condition, because we are a contributor to that service. We don't administer the contract or anything,
Right.
so we're probably, again, one of the smaller fish, but it should probably be captured in existing condition discussion, and then we could talk about a scenario or a model
We
where the
might
town
have our
runs its...
own potential opportunities that aren't dependent on everything that happens at the lake. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question. Great. Cool. No further questions from me. We'll open this up to public comment. Any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council, maybe just for some quick comments. I think in general, we're probably all going to be in alignment with adding as much as possible, because I don't necessarily see a detriment to doing that, to, you know, getting something in the plan. Doesn't mean we're going to necessarily execute on it or anything else, but at least it provides that long-term vision for what we want to see at some point. So I'll hand it over to you, Councilmember Romack.
Yeah, I would definitely say add something around enhanced technology for better user experience and real-time tracking information. I think potential additional support for airport shuttle. I don't know, Mayor Pallavi, that we necessarily have to develop our own. There is a robust one, but it just doesn't come to Truckee very often. And that's, side note, something I've thought about. If, you know, the critical Measure E passes, is it Measure E? Okay. If Measure E passes, we have funding for TART Connect. Maybe it's something we talked to VTT about the money they previously put towards TART Connect, they now put towards the airport shuttle, because that's really to bring visitors to the area. So just, that doesn't necessarily need to go in this plan, but I think it's worth at least highlighting. We would like to continue to support more enhanced travel opportunities from the airport. I definitely think we should include something to Olympic Valley. Looking at the numbers on the Placer Tart route on Highway 89, there's 30,000 passenger trips in the year that it was counted on Highway 89 versus 11,524 on Highway 267. So that's just daytime passengers. So there's a lot more passengers on the Highway 89, and I know the ridership went down, but again, with the changes at parking reservations, I think it's worthwhile to continue to support it. Also, there was mention in the report on page 101 that it mentioned developing a cost-sharing plan with North Star to help subsidize that shuttle. I think that is perfect with Palisades and Olympic Valley, especially because we have an item later on talking about traffic mitigation. So I think it's important to include that in there. And then I guess, previously, and it was mentioned in the report, potentially expanding TART Connect into the Placer County neighborhoods that are directly adjacent to Truckee, and there'd have to working out with Placer on funding of that. I guess if that's something mentioning in scenario A as well, I think Hopkins Village and Sierra Meadows, all that kind of stuff, that would be important. And then just last thing I was going to mention is today at the Placer County Board of Supervisors, they just approved a contract to do a TART systems plan update. So Placer County is going to be taking a broad look at the TART systems plan and regional service, TART Connect in Placer. So I think just something for us all to be tracking on, because I really appreciated in this report later on how it showed if you were trying to take the Truckee fixed route to a Placer regional route, how just your times one way would be good and one way would not be good. So just encouraging us, I know you're always participating in all these conversations, but this is an exciting time to make sure as we're potentially making changes, it's lining up with anything that's happening regionally. And with that, just thank you guys. This was a really interesting report with lots of data and good thing to geek out to. So appreciate this and happy to hear what my fellow council members have to say.
That's why you went first, because you just summarized it really well. So we appreciate you for that. Go ahead, Councilmember Klostad, if you got anything to add.
I thank you for all of that. I have nothing to change and nothing to add to your requests and on what we consider in here, and echo your sentiment that this was another great set of data to geek out on. There was a quote in here that really stood out to me. Absent higher frequency and expanded service hours in areas the private vehicle has and will continue to remain the preferred mode of travel for visitors. Our VMT is going up consistently, and that is not consistent with our goals. And I'd really love to see us shifting that dependence. I think this is a great path to help us get there, which is why I was kind of asking for some of the goals and reaches of these possible programs. So I'm in full support.
Important. Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, anything to add?
No, I think it's all been summarized beautifully. I think your expertise shines through so well in these conversations, so I'm really grateful for it, honestly.
Mr. Zabriskie.
Echo my colleagues, great report. The problem for the future doesn't lie with the report, it lies with the future, what we're facing in terms of transportation. Did that sound political? Yeah. There's a lot of moving pieces, and one of the things that struck me is how much of the how much of the transportation is in and out of town or coming through town. I mean, we definitely are part of a circulation pattern where people are passing through, going in opposite directions. That's a really tough thing to address. I realize, echoing what Councilmember Romack said, this is very much a regional issue. Thank goodness for the Transportation Management Association in that regard. I can see us wanting to work even harder through them to achieve the goals that include those that Councilmember Klostad alluded to, the VMTs. But when I look, being on the River Revitalization Committee, I start imagining the increase in traffic along River Street if we redevelop it. And that traffic's going to increase one way or the other, but it's like, how do we handle all this increased traffic when we can't widen the roads? And I always keep coming back, the only way to do it is through transit, so it's figuring out how to make it work in the best way. And I don't know what that is yet, but I am latching on to TART Connect and remain very concerned that we need to show an increase. And I'm afraid we need to show a vast increase in participants to gain broad community support. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but I'm sure would like to hear.
Yeah, appreciate all of that. And, I think the only thing that we're avoiding maybe in this conversation is the increase in transit, the increase in use in transit, and I agree with absolutely everything that's been said, is the use of the private vehicle and how that impacts our roadways and what makes transit more appealing to take, and how we get there. And so this is a great transit plan, and it's a part of our circulation plan, but I think that's also, super key to making this successful is making sure that we have the circulation. We shut down one on-ramp to I-80 and all of a sudden West River Street's like backed up past Truckee Tire, right? And that's like 4 days, just right now in September or in August, whatever month we're in. But so to me, I also reflect on the offloading of I-80 when there's the construction and how that impacts all of our peak periods. So to me, this is one piece of it. In order to achieve all of the things that we're all talking about, it's imperative that we also make sure we're paying attention to how that circulation works as a whole and how we prioritize transit on our roadways, and create opportunities for that moving forward, because I think that's what starts to also turn the needle on Palisades and North Star and all of these other services that we're talking about providing. So that was just my addition. I support everything that's been said. It was said very eloquently, and we really appreciate your report, Genevieve. So we will, with that, we will accept it and receive our update, and appreciate you guys, and good luck at NCTC, and keep us in the loop and let us know how we can assist. Thank you. Thanks, Alfred.
Thank you.
Yeah. And with that, we'll take a 10-minute break. I can't even see the clock back there, but at least on my clock, it's 7:07. Let's come back 7:15. We'll do like a 7-minute break, 8-minute break for item 7.5. Thank you. We're on. Excellent. Item 7.5, we have the 2024 Functional Evacuation Exercise After Action Report and Improvement Plan. And this was just such a really intriguing event, or whatever we're calling exercise. So I'm interested in your presentation, James. Let's hear it.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Very happy to be here today to present the 2024 Functional Evacuation Exercise, bit of a mouthful, After Action Report and Improvement Plan. And so with that, a recommended action is that really you accept the After Action Plan or After Action Report and Improvement Plan, and we'll go over exactly what that is. So basically, I want to present an overview of what the exercise was, what we were doing last April, a little bit of information about the report, the very beneficial improvement plan that goes with it, and then next steps from there. So I did really want to highlight, before I dive into it, that we really were bearing the fruits of the labor of Robert Womack, who put a ton of effort into this exercise. It took, he put together a multi-agency planning team, which really led to what you see there in the photos, a huge successful exercise. So we had, over 70 participants, nearing 30 different agencies represented, which is a huge feat to get everybody like that together, to commit that amount of time. It was a whole morning into the early afternoon, and it was because of that effort that we were able to learn and help improve our future responses. So the scenario that was put together, a little devious, but actually very plausible exercise of a wildfire starting in the Coldstream Canyon area and following those prevailing winds to the northeast. And so it was a challenging exercise. It challenged both Incident Command and the Emergency Operations Center, both of which were activated. And there was lots of what we call injects for exercises that were put in to help spur action for the participants. So different events that would accelerate the exercise and cause the participants to make decisions, hopefully the right ones, but learn from all the decisions that were made. I did want to note that it is aligned with the FEMA Homeland Security Exercise Evaluation Program, also known as HCEP. So it's a very kind of defined process on a way to conduct emergency management exercises and evaluate them as well. And so the whole exercise was actually developed that way. The term functional exercise, which is used throughout this, is a very defined term. And so in FEMA speak, there's two types of exercises. You can have discussion-based, your tabletops, you're just straight discussions about an item, and then you have operational exercises. And so that's broken apart between functional exercises, which is what we did, and a full-scale exercise. And what brings you from functional to full scale is if you really have movement of resources out there. So all the activity here from this exercise was in this room for Incident Command in our Emergency Operations Center, which is the Prosser room down the hall. We didn't have actual movement of fire engines or police vehicles. We're all focused in here. Part of that process, which with HCEP, is testing specific core capabilities and objectives. It can get pretty large when you start putting together an exercise of this scope on what you're actually looking at and evaluating. And so it's good to kind of hone those down and pick what you want to exercise and evaluate. So these are the core capabilities. There are a total of 7 of them, which is actually pretty large from an exercise planning perspective. The reason why there are a total of 7, usually you might see 2 to 3, ever so rarely 4 core capabilities that you test. But we really had a robust participation rate from both the incident command side and the EOC side. And so that allowed us to really take a look at a lot of different things. So from mass care services, public information and warning, critical transportation, those were more focuses from the EOC standpoint. And then the operational coordination, which was also a big part of the EOC, but very specific along with situational assessment, on-scene security protection and law enforcement, also known as evacuations. That's a defined term in FEMA speak. And then also fire management and suppression. And so the after action report, that was the exercise, and afterwards, it's an opportunity to learn from what we did. There was a great experience, a lot of successes. I would say one of the biggest successes with this exercise was really the ability to bolster relationships. Anybody that's been through a large disaster or emergency will tell you that relationships is one of the most important things in getting through them. And so this was a great opportunity to enhance that and work together with a bunch of different agencies. But the after action report, we're bringing that. I love this quote here that we don't learn from experience, but we learn from reflecting on experience. And that's kind of the intent of this. It's not used to judge success or failures. It's really to enhance the strengths that we had and overcome some of the challenges that we identified, just to make sure that we are much more equipped to serve our community for future emergencies. So the report provides an overview of the exercise, fairly lengthy, and in all the planning activities before it conducts a strengths and challenges assessment. And after that assessment, it's done, it identifies really the action items that build the improvement plan. So the improvement plan is really that framework to help overcome those challenges. Within that improvement plan, there's set timeframes and priority levels. Making sure that basically the high priority items are set based on things that would immediately impact safety or potentially, if you don't take action, could hamper our response to an ability that it actually reflects on public safety. And then those medium priority levels are things that really could have an impact, not necessarily clearly definitive on having an impact, but could likely lead to an impact. And those low items, which we don't have a whole lot of, I believe there's just one on this report, is really things that you've identified that can improve things in the future, but if you don't take action on them, really it's not going to impact what the community feels on that response level. So within this after action report and improvement plan, we identified 16 total actions. This is kind of a little bit of a busy chart, but breaks those actions down, the majority of which lie within public information and warning and operational coordination. And I'll go over kind of what these really mean on the next slides, but also wanted to highlight the improvement actions by priority. So the majority of them medium priority, the high ones, really those fell on the public information and warning items, just because of the importance for people to get that right information at the right time so they can make those right decisions. And then finally, that low item was really mostly about our ability to elicit feedback from participants to help build these plans for the future. So the improvement plan was really the way that the report was put together was to separate the Emergency Operations Center from Incident Command. The Emergency Operations Center, some of the items that were identified, so mass care services, really that falls under sheltering. Because we're pretty geographically isolated and we're surrounded by a pretty prevalent wildfire threat, it's possible that all our identified evacuation centers could be impacted, whether it's in an evacuation warning area or an order area, which could impact our ability to shelter evacuees locally. So that really highlighted the importance of trying to identify more regional-based evacuation centers, whether it's to the south of us, to the west of us, or even to the east of us, is take a look at that. There are a lot more challenges to the east of us, even though that's a lot of times the easiest thing to do in a wildfire is to send people on I-80 and head them east towards Reno. There are some difficulties when you cross the state lines where you have those interstate agreements that can be challenging to get. It is something that's being looked at not just at our local level, but at the county and also at the state level. So there have been meetings over the past 6 months with Cal OES, the entire regional area, so Truckee and the Tahoe Basin area. It is a situation that they encountered during the Caldor fire. and something that's being looked at, but not an easy solution. Another part of Mass Care Services is about, you may have heard it before, is just that our Red Cross volunteer levels, they dropped significantly during COVID. That's not just here, that's nationally. And so it's a struggle because typically Red Cross is one of the primary organizations that help support an evacuation shelter. Public information and warning. The EOC actually did a great job at getting that information out. So updating our Genesis, our evacuation zones, using code red, sending out wireless emergency alerts through the integrated public alert and warning system, another acronym, IPAWS, lots of them in emergency management. There is an acronym page at the end of these reports. But one of the challenges there is that not only is it best practice and a really important thing to do for our community, but it's also, we're legally responsible of providing Spanish language emergency information during emergencies. And so that is another process to be done when you're trying to get this information out. You're trying to do it accurately, you're trying to do it timely, and when you have to translate English messages into Spanish, that can cause some delays. So there are some quick ways to do it. You can do it on the internet. You've got tools like Google Translate, but there are issues with that because it doesn't translate very well all the time. And there are some subtle differences in languages that could cause problems from a communication standpoint. So it just highlighted the importance of having, whether it's somebody that's on staff or on contract or some sort of process that can quickly translate information. One of the ways we've done that, actually, we've actually already started working on a lot of these items, is putting together templates. So we have pre-built templates for a number of different emergency situations that have been pre-vetted by Spanish fluent translators, and so we have those basically in a file that we can quick copy and paste and just update small things like zones and things like that. But still, every scenario is different, and templates are great, but they don't always fit the mold of an incident. The operational coordination part, so that came down to really staffing shortages within our EOC. And one of the biggest challenges, and it's hit on number 4 there, is that the resources within the Emergency Operations Center, one thing that really stood out and was apparent is just that we need more people in the Emergency Operations Center to get more work done. And so a lot of that operational coordination was kind of detracted from, delayed, because people were wearing multiple hats. And so it delayed communications and some of that coordination. And so something that stood out, something that's being worked on. Even this morning, I met with the department head team to help identify some staff members within the town that can fill some key roles, and we're going to start the process of training and overcome that challenge. The last one, critical transportation. We put together a really good, what I like to call, I'm throwing another one at you, PACE plan. So primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency plan for transportation resources. And so really what that's there for is making sure that we can meet the needs of our community members that are challenged with mobility, and people that don't have vehicles, maybe they're disabled, they don't get around as well. And so what resources do we have locally to help transport people out of harm's way? And so we've got a great list. We have great verbal handshake agreements with a number of local partner agencies. But one way we can enhance that is really creating some formal agreements with different agencies to make sure when we pick up that phone call, the process of getting resources over to the people that need it is faster. Moving on to Incident Command, they did a fantastic job, really, in working together, both law enforcement and fire, all the different agencies of law enforcement and fire in our region, in trying to meet the needs of the incident, which was very challenging. The entire town ended up in this scenario being under an evacuation order. So pretty challenging, pretty stressful, but they worked together. One of the things that were highlighted on just slight tweaks of improvement is the importance of, during unified command, coming together a lot quicker with law enforcement and fire at one single spot, just to streamline communications. We already saw that benefit from what we learned there with the recent past fire. So almost instantaneously, fire and law enforcement, our police department, and we're working hand in hand. And so we've already seen improvements in that area. The last one, evacuation. Somewhat of a small one. There's a great software platform that is used, the CalTopo, that law enforcement can use for a kind of situational awareness tool. And so just improved awareness on how to use that tool from the field level. Maybe additional training could have some improvements on just better situational awareness from all the responders. So next steps, I know one of the questions in the council questions this week were, hey, how does this relate to the work plan? Well, a bunch of these items on the improvement plan are actually already identified in the work plan. And so not a lot of these were surprises. And so we'll definitely continue to carry that work forward. Anything that's new, not on the current work plan, that we want to carry over, we'll definitely take that into consideration based on priorities and resource capabilities and all that. So that you may see that more in the future. But definitely incorporating these items on a master improvement plan tracker. It's kind of unfortunate in the industry of emergency management when you do these plans, they kind of get shelved away and not a whole lot of progress is made. So it's important to maintain this sort of tracker, similar to the work plan tracker that you see, just internally to make sure that we're accomplishing what we intend to accomplish. A lot of this work is working with partner agencies to help achieve these goals, and finally, more training. And that brings us back to the action of you accepting the after action report and improvement plan for the town of Truckee's 2024 functional evacuation exercise. Comments, questions, or questions, comments?
The amount of progress and strides you guys are making in this department is incredible. Great job. Who's got questions other than compliments at this point? You got some questions? No? Any questions on this side, Vice Mayor? I'm sure you do. Yes, he's got some.
When do you plan to do your next functional evacuation exercise?
So likely in the spring. Really, the goal is to have an exercise of that scale done once a year. And it'll change. In my mind, I'd like to use a different scenario and to kind of test different hazards that face the town of Truckee. And then also not just at this scale, but have a smaller, more of the discussion-based exercise a year. So that's typically one of the best ways to continue that ability to take a look to make sure we're doing the things correctly.
Okay. And one of the neighborhoods we hear the most from about evacuations concerns is Tahoe Donner. Can you share anything you learn in particular about Tahoe Donner going through this exercise? Is it possible to?
Yeah, no, that's no problem. So not captured in this report, but happy to share. So they participated. They were observing the exercise and really learning, which was a great opportunity because they had the ability to kind of see how we operate, how we set our priorities, our objectives, and can better understand how that fits within their world during an emergency. And so what it helped identify is that the ability to stand up, one thing I didn't cover here, is a Joint Information Center, also known as a JIC. Another one at you, Joint Information Center. And so what that is multi-agencies coming together to make sure that that message is consistent across our community, timely, vetted, and everybody, it's basically one voice for the incident. And so bringing them in, the Tahoe Donner, having representatives on that regional kind of PIO team. We actually have a meeting scheduled next week of kind of a core group of Truckee-based public information officers. So that way we have some of that relationship, some bolstering of relationships. And that way, if there is an emergency that comes up quickly, Tahoe Donner can get the information they need and help enhance our communication to people within their community and how they can fit into it. Of course, the concerns of evacuation are there, and they were kind of able to see how the priorities get set on a changing incident that's burning into that area, because Tahoe Donner was impacted by the incident of the exercise. And so really it cemented the importance of making sure that it stays top of mind that we're trying to improve and enhance our ability to get everybody out during an emergency and get emergency vehicles in. So that kind of leads into some of the direction that you all provided on allowing some of the TSSA1 funds to come in to help fund an evacuation study for that area in particular.
And was the Tahoe Donner involvement done through its homeowners association?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Then my final question is, where are we in terms of actually posting evacuation zone numbers in neighborhoods that where it's easy to do it, where there's already a public service sign and the entire neighborhood is one zone?
Yeah, so we have some internal meetings scheduled to discuss that. It's something that is, it's a big thing, right? If you decide like we're going to start putting evacuation signs, whether it's routes or zone numbers and all that, definitely a way to increase awareness for zones. The town of Paradise recently rolled that out, where basically you cross one line of a zone into another and there's a sign on the side of the road. There's a lot of impacts and a lot of associated impacts for doing something like that. Has to be done thoughtfully. It might be included within that Tahoe Donner scope of work on when they do that evacuation study to kind of take a look at what that deployment might look like on a larger scale. But yeah, we are meeting this week to kind of discuss what that might look like if maybe a smaller community where it's one road in and that's the only zone kind of deal, to see if it might work. Maybe it can be piloted. But you have to think about the downstream if we're going to start it in one spot, how it scales out and what that looks like and what those impacts can be, and weighing that with the awareness. So it would be a big project. It would take a lot of community input and a lot of input internally and input from staff or from council as well.
Okay, for a neighborhood like Olympic Heights or Prosser Lakeview, which I believe each just have a single zone number, what are the complications with just posting the evacuation zone number at the entrances?
So the complications might not be huge for that particular zone if an HOA is interested in putting some of the signage up, as long as it's meeting the standards of the town and all that. It's not encroaching on town right-of-way, things like that. I'm not a zoning expert on right-of-ways, but I wouldn't say that there would be a challenge for that outside of any of those infrastructure impacts that might be associated with it. I would say from an emergency manager standpoint, the consistency is really important. And if everybody started doing different things and you have different signs and different messaging, that could be a problem. And so you'd want to have it done as a holistic way, in my recommendation. And that's why I think it's important that if you do go down the path towards putting emergency signage for emergency routes and zones, that you do that on a really thoughtful process. And that's my take on it.
Thank you.
Good questions. I gave you a chance, right? You're good. Public comment? Eric, come on. Were you there? You were not there. No, my fire chief. Yeah. No, totally agree. Closing, that was a public comment, by the way, so thank you. Closing public comments and, just bringing it back for deliberation and, being present for that. I've told you guys before, it was truly a treat. It was amazing to see the work that these guys all did. And, getting these after action reports are just incredibly valuable. And I think James even acknowledged, getting more feedback out of those after action reports would also be great too. So yeah, feel free to add.
I would just say great job, ditto all that, and impressed. All the acronyms too. Like you can just rattle them off without looking at anything. So just really appreciate you and all the staff that were involved in that exercise and all the planning and the reflecting on how we can make things better. So thank you.
I thought not only was the report very robust and detailed, but the honest assessment of the opportunities for improvement was pretty striking. And I learned something from the recent podcast that with our IT team at Kim Zurich. So I really appreciate that you sending that to us, because one thing that Chris said was make all the plans for an emergency and then take away one thing you're assuming or one one thing that you would rely on and see how well you would still be able to do with that plan. And that's essentially what you guys are doing here. And it's brilliant, it's important. You know, I really commend you for doing so, and now our IT staff for doing the same, like defending a cyber attack in the middle of a pandemic. So, thank you.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yeah, just wonderful work. I think this is one of the biggest concerns of our community, and where we have sort of the most anxiety and angst and fear is, you know, what happens, right? And so doing everything that we can possibly do to prepare, to try different scenarios, to make sure our communication is as robust as possible is just so critical. And I love the after action report. We had the one from 4th of July before. I think we learned so much, and I hope that the community gets to see more of this as well, just what comes out of the after action report. I think that'll be really, really valuable. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, sir. Anything to add?
No.
No. Great. Yeah, keep up the amazing work. Like, just in the 4 years, 6 years we've all been seeing all of this develop, it's impressive. So yeah, great job. Thank you. Our community should be proud. With that, no, never mind. You are staying.
I'm staying here.
You are staying. Good. 7.6. Thank you for your patience. Truckee Fire Protection District 2024 Community Wildfire Protection Plan. James, Eric, take it away.
Yes. Thank you. Happy to be back here so soon. So before we really get into this item, I did want to share a great video that was put together just this past week, and it went out actually today with the Talk of the Town. So it's available for community members to view. But it's a community perspective on being ready Truckee after the past fire. So I wanted to share that is really apropos of this subject of a community wildfire protection plan, the stress on the word community. And so I thought it would be a good lead in for the discussion. Apologies to April for the beginning of this.
I'm April Cole. I'm a Truckee resident. And with the recent past fire, it really made me think about the importance of a go bag and being ready to go really quickly. We got the notification by our phone for evacuation warnings. I have a wonderful little magnet from the town of Truckee that says you're in zone 1, 2, 3. And I noticed that my zone was not on the evacuation orders, but I thought it was important to look up and see what was happening in Truckee. So I followed the link that was pushed to me from the alerts from the town of Truckee. I noticed that the evacuation warning butted right up to my property line. So I was really just kind of in this limbo stage. And I recognized that at any moment, that limbo stage could move from you're okay to a warning. Understanding our evacuation routes from our community are limited. If all of us were to go at the same time, that would spell disaster. So we opted to be ready and go a little bit early so that we could know that we were confident in our safety, and also so that we weren't causing more traffic. When there's an emergency, there's very little time to respond. And that's why it is so important to have a go bag ready. I looked on the Town of Truckee website. They have a lot of resources, not only to sign up for whatever alert system to make sure you get the warning or you get the evacuation, but also what to put in your go bag. Something else to note with a quick evacuation situation is that we do have signups for alerts through the Town of Truckee and their alert system, but there's also going to be a high-low siren. If you hear a high-low siren, that means get out of the door right now. Bottom line, have a plan now. Have your go bag ready now. There's very little time to evacuate in the case of a real emergency, and you need to be ready to go. I'm April Cole.
And so that's a part of a video series. Special thanks to Court Leave and Braun Roberts for really leading the effort to try to put this together. That will be released really in the next month. September's National Preparedness Month, so it's a good fitting time. It's also one of the most risky times in terms of wildfire in the state of California as we head into the late summer, early fall months. So more to come on that. It's going to be a great series talking about the high-low sirens specifically, information about registering for emergency alerts and evacuation zones. So more to come on that. All right, so back to the regular scheduled topic. The council authorizes the mayor to sign the Truckee Fire Protection District's 2024 Community Wildfire Protection Plan, affirming the town's participation in the development process and support of the plan. And so most of this is going to be kicked over to the Truckee Fire Protection District. But before, I wanted to take the opportunity to identify kind of how the town fits in within the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And really, it's been a long process of staff and community involvement to put this plan together. And what's really important to note is the alignment that it has both with our general plan, safety element or safety and noise element, and your strategic priorities for the 2023-25 period. And so wanted to highlight some of those connections, one of which was actually supporting the Community Wildfire Protection Plan on its own. But within it, you have field treatments along evacuation routes, communication and outreach, communication tools, non-resident education. All these things are items that we have identified within the 2040 general plan as important work items and policies. So just wanted to make sure that you all could see that connection, visualize it a little bit for you before I turn it over to Eric. And before I do that, as he comes up to the podium, I do want to say, so before I came here at the town of Truckee, I worked within a fire department. I was in the midst of starting the endeavor of updating a community wildfire protection plan. And I do want to highlight how statewide the Truckee Fire Protection District's process on going about this and this plan is known as really a gold standard for doing this. And so I wanted to highlight that. This is Eric right there, presenting to the International Association of Fire Chiefs annual WUWI conference, which is held annually in Reno, which really highlights what that's seen both on a statewide and also national and international level of really what it's seen for this plan. So without further ado, turn it over to Eric Hornvet. He is the Wildfire Prevention Manager with the Truckee Fire Protection District.
Well, thank you, James. I appreciate it. I wasn't going to talk about the WUWI conference. But anyway, good evening, Truckee. Glad to be here, council staff, and talk about our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Before we jump in, I want to give you a little bit of history, is that CWPPs were, they've been around for about 20 years now, and Truckee's really goes back to 2016. So our first CWPP put together by Truckee Fire was done in 2016, and it was like maybe the town's first time of doing an LHMP, right? Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. Stab something together, get some mitigations on the ground so you can access funding. And so we've evolved from that. And so now, as you heard from this introduction, we're really moving towards a cutting-edge, leading community wildfire protection plan that does it the Truckee way, right? Bringing together collaborators, data, scientific approaches, and really having a good wildfire mitigation roadmap for our community. You might have to click through some, Go back one. Right, converting over. Anyway, this was a nice agenda of what we're going to talk about, but we're just going to go through what is a CWPP, what process did we go through to prepare our community wildfire protection plan, digging into a little bit of the document at a higher level, not going into the full depth or weeds of the document like we have online, what the signatory process looks like, and then what our next steps are. Pictures here are real wildfire threats. If those of you don't know, that structure fire was right at Donner Lake, right on Donner Pass Road. We were very lucky to have that not extend further into the vegetation. And then that is the 2007 80 fire that started right at 80 and burned through the 1960 Donner Ridge fire scar towards Tahoe Donner. So, these are real, and as we've seen this summer with the Royal Fire, Pass Fire, and numerous other false fire starts, that's something we really need to be working on preventing and mitigating. All right, so with that, what is a CWPP? Just like everything else, right, a CWPP came from of legislation nationally. It was the Healthy Forest Restoration Act, and it basically came up with this process of collaborating, using data, conducting a risk assessment, and having government and foresters sign a document that you're putting together recommendations for addressing fuels reduction, structure ignitability, educating your public on wildfire and fire threats, and also where can you improve those fire response capabilities that also includes evacuation now. Really important to know it's rooted in facilitated collaboration. So bringing in experts, consultants on community wildfire protection plans, data, but making sure that you have kind of that, lead for every agency, every stakeholder, landowner, and opportunity for the public to get educated and engaged on the process. All right, so what is a CWPP, right? This really goes into, we know what it is, right? We have wildfire threat, it's super real. Wildfire severity is going to continue to increase, right? We have our forests that are growing as we're standing here. We have overstocked, overly dense forests. We got to a point with mismanagement of our lands, not allowing fires to burn naturally, this war on fire, this fire suppression stance, and then not implementing any maintenance tools. We weren't grazing, we weren't managing, we weren't logging, and we have forests that are really susceptible to high intensity wildfire. To make that situation worse, unknowingly we dropped homes out of the sky purposefully to look like they were going to blend into the forest. And now we have this WUI, this wildland urban interface that really makes this situation even more complex, right? It's not the Forest Service out way in the woods putting out a fire with indirect line and back burning. You're trying to protect lives and property in our community. So with that, this CWPP is just a best practice document, a risk assessment and action plan, so that as a community, Truckee has a prioritized wildfire mitigation roadmap for how we quite literally dig and move ourselves out of this issue. So the process was, of course, the Truckee way. So Truckee Fire really did this the Truckee way. We came in with Measure T, which is awesome. We have local dedicated funding for wildfire prevention and mitigation, some staff capacities, great partnerships and relationships in the community. But then we took a new way of doing a CWPP. Is we actually built upon the success of the Middle Truckee River Watershed Forest Health Assessment. This was a very in-depth, scientific, data-driven environmental assessment that the Truckee River Watershed Council led that turned into the Middle Truckee River Watershed Forest Partnership. Big terms, but what it means is you got a lot of agencies working together with data, wanting to foster healthy, resilient forests. And we know these are critical to also protect our communities. So we piggybacked off that, and we actually entered into agreements with SWCA Environmental Consultants. They were the leading consultant for producing community wildfire protection plans across the entire West Coast. And then Vibrant Planet in their land tender software was what the Truckee River Watershed Council used for that assessment. And so this had a way better base layer of data than you would ever start with when you start conducting a risk assessment, right? We're not just looking at structures, evac routes, roads, and dense forests. We're actually looking at that whole suite of kind of environmental resources. And then we partnered up with the town and some of the efforts that was going on with Nevada County and the town of Truckee and Bob Womack, and helped bring in Ladris evacuation modeling outputs and some of that into this plan as well. So really took a unique way of taking 3 contractors and forcing them to work together to prepare a plan for us. Community engagement was critical. We set together a really good project team, and that's all those people on the signatory page that you saw. And they met typically once every 2 weeks or at least once a month over more than a year period. We had multiple, I think about 6 stakeholder engagement meetings and dedicated stakeholder update and input meetings. And then a really robust community engagement and public comment period, targeting our HOAs, Firewise, all these community outlets to make sure we could get presentations, education, mapping updates. So we had one of those right here in this room, really trying to get feedback from our community to make this the community's plan. This plan, as you've seen it on our website and our story map and in the document, has actually been finalized since April 2024. We're just getting around to getting this thing presented and signed. So we're excited to get that pushed through. All right, so this is a quick overview of the process. This is what we went through. We convened and engaged our decision makers. This is really all of our partner trusted agencies, landowners, right? Some of the big landowners that were part of our project team were like Tahoe Donner, Truckee Donner Land Trust, right? Some of these unique partners we have here. We convened and engaged stakeholders. Think of like any agency, acronym in this area. We had them at the table. We established a new community base map, our wildland-urban interface map, conduct a very in-depth wildfire risk assessment, established priorities, recommendations, and developed what's really important is an actionable and implementable plan. Then we engaged the community for education, input, feedback, making sure this thing was well-rounded. And now the plan's finalized. We're ready for signatures. And then I highlighted the most important step. Don't let this thing sit on the shelf like some of the old CWPPs or old LHMPs do, but let's get this thing out on the ground, actionable. All right, so this goes into the WUI. Hopefully all you guys know the wildland-urban interface living here. But we started with a little bit different call out than what has normally been done. Truckee's unique. Most of our community is not like a cookie cutter cement and stucco construction meets overgrown forest or brushland. You know, the way we developed this community and kind of the whole purpose and passion behind a lot of the construction here was building homes that worked with nature. And so from a fire standpoint, you added fuel to overgrown fuel. So we call this the WUI intermix, right? You drop structures that are burnable fuel inside of live and dead forest vegetation. And so we created this buffer, a 250-foot kind of defensible space extended buffer off of our structures. Then our critical WUI defense buffer is another quarter mile, you know, right outside that community boundary, right where you walk your dog on kind of those trails in the forest networks behind your house. And then the WUI threat zone bumped out another 1.25 miles. So what this looks like, if you hit the next slide, is a buffer that extends way beyond Truckee Fire Protection District's boundary. So this plan is more than just Truckee Fire. It's more than just the town, right? This covers unincorporated portions of Nevada, Placer County, extending almost into Sierra County on the northern boundary. The sphere of influence with Measure T and our focus is really, you know, in the town of Truckee and within our Fire Protection District boundary that you're seeing in that dark line here. But we didn't want to stop. We had the data, we had the resources, and we know once we get our resources funneled and working here within our jurisdiction that, you know, we need to have these partnerships and these collaborations working on areas outside of just fire district or town boundaries. Just like fire knows no boundaries, so do our partnerships. With that, we get into strategic areas, resources, and assets. So this is all that data collection. So we looked at way more than just normal fire risk assessments, but cultural, natural, socioeconomic, biological data. Really pulled it in, divided it up by communities, and then really started bringing in all of our critical access routes, you know, egress, hospitals, schools, critical infrastructure. And our goal with this and with our team was really getting like the best available data into this plan so that we could model it and get the best available data out so that we had a good, implementable, defendable plan. That's a bunch of data. So the risk assessment is that we're evaluating, you know, wildfire hazards. This is pretty unique, is that land tender, bringing them to the table, they really provided industry-leading standards. This plan is actually bringing in synthetic LiDAR, which was actually trained on the LiDAR flight that the town flew and uses. So some, you know, congrats to that, was the way this was rolled out. It brought in Pyrologic's fire modeling. This is the industry's best standard fire behavior and fire risk modeling. And also uniquely, we're looking at like above ground tree biomass, vegetation growth simulation and modeling, regrowth post-treatment. So we really brought in a ton of data so that we can make sure we're thinking about not only what are we doing now, what's our maintenance plan, what's our retreatment plan, where can we prioritize, you know, our limited resources now, but where do we need to be thinking long-term into the future as well. This is what that risk assessment map looks like. And, you know, this is important to know that this is not a fire hazard severity zone map. That's done by the state. That looks at like fuels, topography, weather, exposure. This is really looking at what values in our community are at the highest risk to wildfire. So it goes above and beyond just like a fire behavior map or that. This is really zooming us in. You know, the areas darker in red are very high fire hazard severity zone. Most of the areas in yellow are very high fire hazard severity zone. But comparatively in this smaller planning area, you know, we really needed to start to pair this out of where do we need to focus our limited resources, our capacities, our partnerships to get that best restorative return on investment in the landscape so that we can protect life, property, and community. So interesting concept. We broke it down really well in the CWPP document, but by no means does this risk assessment replace fire hazard severity zone maps or any declaration of fire severity that we've identified in the general plan or by Truckee Fire. So just wanted to clarify that. This was really important, is that we really tailored and focused a lot of this plan to ongoing and planned fuels treatment. This was something we really hadn't done before. Truckee Fire came in and we realized there's so much work happening, community level, federal, National Forest Foundation, town right-of-way, veg management, all these other small projects. And we really needed to understand what has been implemented in the last, call it about 8 years since 2016 with our first effort. So we can start to map, the patterns. So if you kick the next slide, is that all the purple are projects that have been implemented. These shouldn't surprise anyone on council or staff, right? A tremendous amount of work done in Tahoe Donner through Tahoe Donner Forestry. Some of the projects that were done by Gray's Crossing and Old Greenwood HOA, some of the Forest Service work north of Prosser Lakeview. Of course, on Highway 89 corridor, the Big Jack East project that the Forest Service was working on. And then to the east of the airport, we had that Glenshire to Brockway fuel break. So those were kind of just some of the major projects that were going on. There's definitely some Truckee Donner Land Trust projects speckled in there, but cool map when you look at it online. You can really dig into. Purple is what's been completed since 2016. Orange or yellowish is what's currently being implemented. And then green is planned. And some of this is going to be updated this winter. As we all know, the Cabin Creek project near the Eastern Regional Landfill kicked off this spring. So we're already seeing some of those planned acres and critical acres in our CWPP getting implemented on, which is awesome. So anyway, as a group, we really realized we needed to focus on priorities fuels treatment. Some of the biggest issues, we know we have a really robust defensible space inspection program, lots of resources, lots of stuff being poured in with Measure T, but we really needed to zoom in on our collaborative effort for fuels treatments, right? Really get at that forest mitigation level. So Vibrant Planet was the tool and the agency we used to help us do this, and this was really cool. We got into a collaborative meeting with like 17 project team stakeholders, implementers, and we didn't have anyone butting heads. We were using best available data, science. We had different staff members go out and ground truth it that were skeptics of the data that we were pulling in. And we came together, and I think if you kick the next slide there, with an output of high priority treatments. That everyone agreed on. There wasn't like headbutting, like, no, this fish is more important than this house. It was like, no, if we are all working together in these areas, this is super important. So these really critical high priority areas were the areas outlined in gold. This covers about 8,000 acres. Some of the total consensus or next highest priority acres covers 33,000 acres. And then we also, being a flexible agency and wanting to capture valuable input from our stakeholders and concerns and input from community during the process, looped in another 1,500 acres. And we came out with a plan that has 43,000 acres to treat. Right now, are we going to be able to treat that many acres in 5 years? Absolutely not. I think we can get really close to the 8,000 to 10,000 mark in 5 years with this collaborative and this partnership. So really good plan. It really does start to show some of the unfunded need and the amount of work we need to do just to get that first level of maintenance done and then reset the clock for coming back into our forests with, basically treatments every typically 10 to 15 years with one of our methods. We dialed in some really good recommendations. So this was all done through the project team and stakeholders group. We wanted a really clear recommended matrix table. So, what are the actual recommendations? Who's the lead in collaborating agencies and what are we doing? So as we flip through these next few slides, we get into all of our goals for restoring and maintaining landscapes. So we were looking at, different treatments, different areas. Then we move into fire-adapted communities. So this is like defensible space inspections, home hardening, public outreach, education, all these different programs. And then one more. And then here we get into safe and effective wildfire response. So, like the topic just said, we had one project for improving address visibility for a moving response. There's another one in there that gets into some of the evacuation, routes, things like that. So we tried to pull in multiple areas that we know can use improvement and, working closely with Office of Emergency Management and County OES to make sure we're thinking about these things smartly. Another thing is you can't do a plan without, saying that you're going to monitor and track your accomplishments, right? We know how important that is. If you just say, I have a plan, I'm doing it, people are like, show me the results. So we have this. We crafted, a pretty simple monitoring and evaluation document, but just some things that we should really be moving towards, especially when we're treating landscape, but like pre and post project photos is a standard deliverable. Getting some set permanent photo points, maybe even looking into some of our camera systems and drone systems to fly some flights, look at updating LiDAR, all these cool ways to make sure that we're really thinking about what's working, what's not working, what's the maintenance cycle need to be. We also called out some vegetation plots and forest inventories, even at this more local level. So, kind of piggybacking on what you saw the Forest Service do on a larger level. And then making sure we're really thinking about our defensible space inspection data. Most community wildfire protection plans don't even dig into defensible space or home hardening data. And with our Fireaside software that we use, we have about 15,000 properties inspected within our fire district, and we have a tremendous amount of data that we can use and aggregate and really start to look at where do we have forest issues, where do we have defensible space issues, and how can we really use this data to focus our efforts in the community. Going into the next slide here, this is an overview of our in-progress tracker. So we're going to be doing a lot of coordination with Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative, the California Wildfire Task Force, and some other partners, and make sure we get all these things, talking and interoperable, all those acronyms that Drew Jack would be up here using for GIS jargon. But we want to make sure that we set up a community dashboard. So over this winter, we're going to be totally updating our wildfire prevention landing page. We're going to make that an info hub for all of our programs going on in the community. And then we want to get, this digitally hosted dashboard up that really starts to show some meaningful data of, how many acres are being treated, what's our progress on Firewise, what's our progress on, basically defensible space of homes, structure hardening, dollars going into the community, hours being poured back in by our residents and community. So really looking into that, and we'll make sure we engage close with your guys' staff to make sure that we're looking at metrics that are meaningful for all of us. All right, so with that, the adoption of the CWPP is that we have our final presentation done in April. So we checked all of our boxes for the process, really had a good process. We summarized all of the feedback that was received during the public process and, kind of treated this, even though it's not like an environmental document, like an EIR or any of those fun terms we like to hear. We really did try to process community feedback and input like you would for that. So take it seriously, see where we can incorporate it back into the document and make sure this thing reflects that community voice. And we gained overall total acceptance of this document from our project team and our stakeholders. And I didn't get a single I hate you phone call from the public once we had this thing posted on our website. So I think people are stoked that we're thinking about fire and wanting to mitigate the threats. If you haven't checked it out, we got a really, we got a hub site set up. You can go to truckeefire.org/CWPP. The cool thing is we loop this thing in on an online story map. So you guys have probably seen these. Instead of this just being a boring 400-page PDF document, you can actually scroll through the story map, and it's just more of that kind of dynamic digital interface with the document. You can zoom in on the maps and see how close planned treatment areas come to your community and house. You can really interact with it better. And taking 30 minutes to an hour, you can kind of flip through this document through the story map, and it's kind of like watching a movie versus getting 2 pages into a PDF and saying that was enough. So cool way we did that there. And we also built the story map so that our community can use this document even when going after local grant funds. So both Truckee Fire, the Community Foundation, Martis Fund, and some others have local philanthropic mainly or local tax dollars available for grants to Firewise communities, landowners to conduct a lot of these actions. So we built this hub site so when they want to go in and say, here's my treatment area, how high priority is in that, they can just use this CWPP to help show how high priority their area is to the funders. So pretty cool way as well. All right, so CWPP has big three. It says that local fire, local government, and a state forester has to sign this non-regulatory document for it to be considered effective. So what that looks like for us is that I get to go on a road tour between the town, both counties, CAL FIRE, Forest Service, and make sure that we get, Truckee Fire, CAL FIRE, Forest Service, the town, both counties, and then all of our collaborating partners, presentation, on board, and signing this document. So this is just one of those steps for me here with the town. And I listed all of our collaborating and supporting signing partners there below as well. So next steps and now what? So, a big one is funding, right? We need to make sure we are thinking about capacities at all level and funding some of these priority projects, whether it's fuel treatments, public education, community programs, evacuation improvements, any of those. CWPPs are very similar to LHMPs, right? An LHMP lets you access FEMA funds. A CWPP lets you access state funds and be more competitive for other grant funding sources. So it's really, I think, really important that we use this document, this collaboration, to leverage each other's limited capacities and funding and really use the CWPP to help us all prioritize work for Truckee on a risk-based and strategic plan. Environmental compliance and permitting, right? So the CWPP is not a regulatory document, and this stuff comes next. So, a CWPP itself is not a discretionary action or project, but later projects could be. Right? When Truckee Fire wants to go do a 300-acre community evacuation egress fuel break near Glenshire that's currently being planned, we got to go through CEQA and Timber Harvest Plan and Forest Practice Act and this whole level of environmental compliance work. So that all comes later at independent actions that are being led by those independent agencies under their discretionary action. Then we're implementing all these treatments, and we're keeping everything on the back end up to date. Just like you heard for your transportation plan, this is meant to be that dynamic document, something that we don't have to hire a consultant for a couple $100,000 to update this thing again. We can do this through Truckee Fire taking the lead and with our collaborating partners in the community to keep this thing refreshed, up to date, live, and working for our community. And a big one that's going to be on the back of Truckee Fire and hopefully with some big support from the town is keeping this whole project team and stakeholders engaged. I don't want this collaboration and these efforts to stop at a planning process. I want it to carry forward and, just metastasize into something great as we go over to, implementing this plan. So just to give you guys a little insight of what this looks like, is just like an LHMP, we're supposed to update these things every 5 years. So hopefully that process I just laid out is how we do it. The other thing that would trigger us to update a community wildfire protection plan would be a big change on our landscape. So a wildfire or another large disturbance in our community. Major revisions to the national cohesive strategy. So this is kind of that national strategy guiding, wildfire response, recovery, mitigation, all those things. And we really think we can move more towards like maybe once every couple of years, use this kind of living document to really make sure we're rethinking the most important priorities in our community. Well, I had a little thank you, Truckee Fire, for working with us for wildfire resilience here that didn't share, but some cool pictures through the process, right? We had a picture engaging actually with an elementary school and their students and doing a little defensible space project up on Donner Summit. And then you got Dylan working with a few community members. Maybe you might know a few. That's Bill Quisnell on the right there with his back to us, pointing at the map, trying to show us where some priorities are in his community. And then another presentation up in Tahoe, Donner, making sure that, we really had a community input meeting focused specifically for Tahoe, Donner, which had the highest turnout too. So it was actually a good meeting. So with that, I think James and I are ready to answer any questions.
That is
You
it.
good? Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, Eric, impressive work yet again. You guys are all killing it here. Really good job and really impressive product that you've developed, and your energy certainly shows in your enthusiasm. So thank you so much. Any questions? We'll start with Vice Mayor Zabriskie.
Is the fire district involved at all in disposal / contracting for it or anything like that?
Can you clarify? What do you mean by that?
Well, I was wondering what happens to the slash. Is it a case-by-case basis or in terms of removing it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely not related to maybe the CWPP, but yeah, byproduct of all this work is slash. So absolutely, right, we have a few options, and it depends on how you permit it. In California, we got a great thing called the Forest Practice Act. So if you tend to barter, sell, trade, or commercialize any wood product, you need to have filed a timber harvest plan that's been signed and approved by CAL FIRE and have pre and post inspections. So yeah, we use the resources that are available. We take the right processes just like your staff does with CEQA or with permitting. And slash is either going to be chipped and left to maybe decompose in place, right? We have really slow decomposition rates here. It's going to be pile burned. Chip could be lopped and scattered and left to decompose. You could promote prescribed burning at a more broadcast or larger level, or you could look at biomass utilization, so chipping, grinding, hauling to biomass plants, getting logs to sawmills, or just disposing it at the ERL and then they run their utilization process.
In connection with developing and implementing this plan, have you tried to maximize the benefit it would have in terms of insurance, either through talking with the Department of Insurance or carriers or umbrella organizations for the insurance carriers?
No, that's a really good question. I think we loosely covered a little bit on insurance in this plan, but our board at Truckee Fire is where they're really adamantly want to make sure that our efforts at the fire district are working in alignment with insurance, and where this is coming from with insurance is that we need to mitigate again, and mitigate. And so the more work we do for defensible space, structure hardening, fuel reduction, roadside fuel breaks, getting up to date on anything we can do to mitigate the threat of wildfire, remove and reduce those hazards, overall reduce our risk, is where you start to speak to underwriters and reinsurers that then influences insurance decisions. And that's where the state's headed. So yeah, we've been staying on track with some of the new catastrophe model making rules that are coming up. We fully aligned our defensible space inspection with our fireside software to capture defensible space and structure characteristics. So yeah, a lot of thought and effort going into how do we get the data we need, how can we aggregate this data, and how can we start to show off the successes of our wildfire prevention and mitigation efforts to be able to communicate at some of those levels that are going to be challenging to communicate at, but trying to move those multi-billion-dollar underinsurers and reinsurance companies to see the work that's going on here locally. So we're working hard at it.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Councilmember Henderson.
Amazing work. Thank you so much. I loved your presentation. You mentioned that over the next 5 years, maybe we'll be able to treat like 8 to 10,000 of the 43,000 highly prioritized acres. What is the funding need if we were trying to aim for that 8 to 10 in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I got to eat my Wheaties to try to think we're going to get that much. That's definitely a very, very robust goal. But we have a ton of partners, right? Truckee Fire and Measure T isn't in it alone. Neither is the town with your funding and your efforts. We have so much work happening, whether it's through philanthropic donations, local landowners, all this work, is that I do think us getting to a point where we're getting a couple thousand acres done when you start to look at local, state, and federal resources getting work done is super reasonable. And the number's high. Implementation costs on treating 10,000 acres, if you call it $3,000 to $5,000 an acre is a pretty high conservative estimate, maybe more as time goes on, is where you're at. So we have a substantial unfunded need, but I think we have a lot of invested and willing partners to really work on moving this needle.
Thank you.
I do want to jump into that. This plan is really beneficial for securing grant funding within the state. And so having this plan in place really helps competitiveness to get those grant fund dollars.
Yeah. Councilmember Klostad?
No questions.
Also no questions. Thank you. Any public comment? Opening public comment? Seeing none? Closing public comment? I thank you on behalf of our community for putting that together. And yeah, I'm happy to sign it as long as everybody else is in agreement with that and you want to mention anything else. But
I do, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Eric, great presentation. This is it's a lot of complex data that you're trying to assimilate, and just briefly checking out the story map. I'm really excited about that as a pathway to try to help our community understand all that complexity, or at least start to appreciate the complexity that comes into all these prioritizations. And the dashboard is going to be great to watch. I really can't wait to see that. To Councilmember Zabrisky's question, this is precisely what we talk about in every biomass task force meeting, is how can we monetize what we need to take out of our forests and do that in a way that is beneficial to our community. So just so you know, we are actively working on that, and the town is very active in that. And then lastly, I couldn't pass this up without taking a moment to thank our community for supporting Measure T. It really is paying off already in the projects that we're seeing and in reports like this and in opportunities to see the progress like you've already presented on your website. So thanks to the community.
Yeah. Ditto. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
ditto, and
Yeah.
just thanks, Eric, for the presentation. And every time I see you present, you're so dynamic and positive, and I think it really helps the community to listen and better understand the importance of all the work Truckee Fire District is doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything to add over here?
In some of the recommendations in the staff report, there was a reference to making street signs and house numbers highly visible. I'm hoping that we end up with some recommendations on particular kinds of signs. There's so many commercially available signs. Would be good for the community to know what would be considered appropriate or not. Beyond that, I mean, it was a great report. I agree with all the other council members. My questions about why are we signing this were concisely and persuasively answered. So I'm
Excellent.
ready to do.
We'll take a motion because we have to authorize it.
I move we authorize it.
I second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
No. Great. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for being here. Thanks for waiting us out as well. We appreciate you very much. All right. We got one more to go. 7.7 Village at Palisades Tahoe specific plan. Danielle. Wow.
Good evening. I was surprised we didn't have a room full of people when I put this on the agenda.
With purple shirts, yes.
That too. Maybe that was strategic on town manager's part. Although I'm doing the presentation for this, just know that this is sort of a collaborative effort among multiple town staff. So I'm happen to be the lead, but I am not the only person that raised this issue and thought we would bring it back to council for a discussion. I did poach a few slides out of Jenna's presentation from last time council talked about the Village at Palisades project, just to kind of remind us a little bit about the project itself. And then I updated a couple of the photos in here. But this is a large project, and in past practice, the planning staff in particular have paid close attention to development for land use applications and projects that happen sort of in the vicinity, in the region, and kind of watch what's happening with those. I think this is one that the community already had been talking about for years and years and years, and so we just wanted to kind of keep paying attention to its progression and provide that opportunity for council. I just did a couple of very brief slides for this presentation because I think a lot of the community is already aware, but we're moving through the process with Placer County, so they are at the point now where they've had a lot of public comment, a lot of engagement on the specific plan for the Palisades Tahoe project. They've made modifications, because of litigation for their environmental document in response to community feedback. And the town has been a participant in providing feedback, which we did back in 2015 with a comment letter on their draft EIR that Jenna helped put together with a bunch of other town staff feedback. The latest information that's been released by Placer County is their revised final EIR. So in response to the hundreds and hundreds of comments that had been provided on primarily sort of the litigation issues, they now have sort of that finalized document. And then they've scheduled it for not just the EIR, but the entire application in front of the Planning Commission for September 5th. And I pulled out the public notice because Jenna and I were kind of going through and looking at, the list of the types of land use entitlements that they're looking for are pretty long because it's the specific plan, it's, amendments to the Squaw Valley General Plan, it's rezoning of acreage, there's a vesting tentative map, there's a development agreement, and then there's their environmental document. So although it's not a project per se, it's, the 20-year build out of the Village at Palisades at Tahoe project. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's similar to what we do when we adopt a general plan, that it's just a comprehensive document that has long-term implications, not just for Olympic Valley, but for the town of Truckee, just with our connection in the region. So this is just, kind of an overview of what's envisioned within that specific plan. So a mix of uses, everything from, hotels, residential units, lots of square footage for resort destination type uses, lots of parking, some of workforce housing, and then a list of possible uses that are more recreation oriented. So some of the ones listed in blue on here are things that are contemplated as potential uses, not necessarily slated for, yes, we will 100% build these, but because it's a specific plan, they have to identify sort of the wide range of options that might be considered with their future development. And really broken out into sort of two different sections of their planning area, sort of the main village area, and then they also have their east parcel. But you can see if you look at it in sort of the terms of build out from the town's perspective, it's a huge project in one concentrated area that already, without all of this development, has community concerns with sort of employee housing, transit, water supply, evacuation, sort of all the things that we've identified as issues already that this project we think needs to sort of keep thinking about at some level. And these photos, like I said, were updated from Jenna's last presentation because this is pulled out of the 2023 version of the draft specific plan. And what we're presenting for you tonight to consider is really sort of what we talked about last time. So when we raised the issues in front of Placer County, we talked about traffic and circulation impacts, housing and transit, primarily because we were focused on the environmental document. We didn't provide substantial comments on the draft specific plan or anything else, and really tried to kind of focus on things that we thought were issues for the town or had sort of regional concerns. I will say with our recommendation now, due to the timing of when everything was released and sort of our recent knowledge that there's going to be a development agreement and we didn't have full review of that first, we think we'd like to submit put together a draft of a letter, have the mayor sign that on behalf of council if council's interested in that, and kind of focused it on these 5 bullet points on the screen here that we talk about just briefly in the staff report. But we didn't have time to prepare that full draft letter for you to review like we normally would. But the timing of this makes it so that we would have that pretty much done by Tuesday to submit on Tuesday for the Planning Commission meeting on Thursday of next week. So it's a quick turnaround time. We've already started drafting the letter. We have an internal meeting to talk about it on Thursday to go over what those bullet points would be so that council has the opportunity to say, 1, we didn't spend too much time on it if you don't want us to do this, but then 2, if you do want us to put this letter together, we have time also to include whatever other direction you provide us to include besides traffic, transit, water, sort of hospital medical services, fire, safety, and evacuation. So those were sort of the bullet points that we were going to focus on, but this is really an opportunity for 1, council to decide if you want us to do this, and then 2, if you want to add anything to that. And that's my presentation.
Thanks, Danielle. I think maybe I'll just add a tiny bit of color. Jen, last minute, once all of this started moving pretty quickly and we had some idea of timing, just so you all know, Jen organized a meeting. Jen, Danielle, Alfred, Dan, Jenna, myself, we had quite a few people on the meeting. It was an attempt to meet with Supervisor Gustafson and some of the Placer County staff just to try to get an idea of where they were and what was going on. It was a good meeting. It was an opportunity for us to just sort of signal that we had some concerns and we might be doing something like this, and just to sort of soften any type of whatever it might be anticipated or results from how they might react to receiving a letter from the town. It's obviously something we haven't done very strongly. We submitted it, but maybe not in terms of the way we might submit this time. Also in an effort, staff's effort to reflect on our updated legislative platform, which included more interest and more input in regional projects. And so that's sort of where this came from. And just sort of how we got to where we are today. And as Danielle mentioned, just the timing's been pretty quick and tight. And I think staff did a good job of making sure that the 5 of us were on board if we want staff to continue to put effort into something before they go ahead and actually put a ton of effort into something that then got brought to us and we decided we didn't want to submit. So that's just a little bit more color commentary for you all. Any questions? I think everybody's had a chance to go first at this point. Councilmember Romack, you're part of this. This is fine. You don't have to recuse. Are you good?
I don't have to
Okay.
recuse myself,
Cool.
but
Great.
yeah, I would clarify. I am an employee of Placer County. I have not been a part of this project in the planning department or anything. I did attend the 7-hour meeting 2 Saturdays ago, and helped hand out comment cards, but I don't have any questions. I would be very interested to hear what my fellow council members have to say.
We'll start with questions, just any clarifying questions. Councilmember Klostad.
No, I don't think I have any clarifying questions. I think it's more, let's talk about what exactly we want to say and what our concerns are. We did receive one public comment on this that I thought had some interesting points, and so I'd love to hear staff reflect on those and my fellow council.
Vice Mayor? Just questions.
Are you able to say how much of what was in Mayor Barr's letter and former manager Tony Lashbrook's letter is still outstanding in terms of our criticisms before?
I mean, we haven't had a substantial amount of time to go through it in detail, but Jenna might be able to, since she wrote it last time, provide a little bit more context for it. I think that would be a good option.
I would say it does kind of sound like deja vu all over. Reminiscent of the last time it went to the county planning commission.
Yeah, in 2015, we focused on the draft EIR and got fairly into the minutia on transit and intersection impacts in the town, not within Placer County. Had some concerns about water availability, and then kind of went away from the EIR and made a policy decision to focus rather on a couple bigger picture issues. Foremost was housing. And I would say that remains an outstanding issue that I think your council would probably believe is not resolved at this point. And I suspect you'll have concerns again, given the high number of employees that are both seasonal and full-time coming out of the project. And I think what we all understand is a extreme housing crisis at this point. It's probably gotten a lot worse than it was in 2016. And then I would say issues that we probably didn't identify that have become much more emergent would be wildfire risk and wildfire evacuation. That's probably something that we'll want to look at more carefully than we did 8 years ago. And then really the transit and intersection impacts, I think, are probably still unresolved and maybe different than they were at the time we wrote the letter in 2016. I think what we all witnessed last season throughout many of the weekends in winter, in Truckee in particular, and kind of gridlock situations, those were not the way they were back in 2016. So those are probably the primary changes.
Okay. And then, did I hear you say, Danielle, the development agreement has not been made public?
So we had the opportunity to kind of understand some of the bullet points of it, but it will be released with the staff report. So we want to have the opportunity to review what's in the staff report in its full description with the development agreement all there. Where right now, when we were putting together this staff report for council, we just had some sense of what the bullet points were for that.
Okay. So part of the problem with our comment letter is we don't have all the information to be complete.
We will.
We will. So
that's why we couldn't do it yet.
Yeah, that's why we couldn't do it in anticipation for this meeting.
For this one, thank you.
But we do anticipate the staff report being released hopefully Thursday is
Okay.
our best guess.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
we were trying to get a sneak peek through our meeting and we were unsuccessful. And so that's why we're kind of back to where we are today.
Got it. Thank you.
I think my only one was why not housing, but I think you've just added it. And we're focused on workforce housing.
I did add it. Yeah,
Okay.
I forgot that in the bullets. It
Perfect.
didn't save in my last slide.
Thank you.
My only question, and I do know the answer, but for the benefit of everybody else, Jen, what's the number one employer who's received the most benefit from, at the very minimum, either our lease to locals or THAP program currently?
Lease to locals is definitely the leading, with Palisades Tahoe employees housing, 37 Palisades Tahoe employees out of 305 employees housed, so 12% of the program. The ski outdoor industry as a whole accounts for 89 employees that are housed.
Right.
It's by far our leading industry.
Thank you. That was my only question. Open it up to public comment. Any member of the public? That's all of you. No. Yeah, you're good. Seeing none, closing public comment. Bring it back for deliberation. I think just to quickly start us off, without getting too far into the weeds on exactly what the comment letter says, I'm just going to suggest that we focus on some of these bullets and basically agree or disagree on some of the bullets. If there's something more specific, bring that up, of course, but we really need to rely on our staff from a timing perspective on this at the moment to let them interpret what the document says, what the development agreement is going to come out with, which will hopefully have some significant mitigating factors, but we just don't know what those are at this point. So it could be suggesting strengthening the development agreement in certain ways. It could be suggesting that we support items of the development agreement, things like that, without necessarily saying, we expect 1,000 workforce housing units or something like that. So just to sort of set the table for everybody as we're kind of having this discussion, because we also, haven't seen a staff report either, right? And the way we operate is we don't make comments on things until we see a staff report. So that's a little bit of this delicate balance here in terms of how we're trying to proceed. So with that, Councilmember Romack, do you want to let somebody else start? Yeah, if Councilmember Klosted, go ahead.
Yeah, I think these are obviously the critical impacts that I would like to see mentioned. I would also add other general emergency services. For example, we had that sewage spill in Kings Beach. Well, there was a massive response to that. If you're and you combine that with what we've seen in terms of gridlock in that area, I think just any type of general emergency services have the potential to be highly impacted by this project and the traffic that it will generate. So that's where it touches with all of these things. It touches with the housing. I think the point that you make about our town tax dollars and programs are going to support this industry pretty heavily is a very valid point that we should make to them, and that they should be providing the housing units needed to fund to support this this project, especially since they are now looking at doing things much more full year round, right? They're with the scope of work that they're trying to do, they're trying to add summer activities. And so that is year-round housing that they need to provide. And that is year-round mitigation of these impacts that they need to provide, not just holiday weekends in the winter, which is what we've gotten so far.
Yeah, just to tack onto that quickly before we lose that train of thought. So sort of a mix of workforce housing is a little bit of what I heard you say, not just dorm or not just studio, providing a mix of workforce housing that can support a mix of employment types, I think, is one. And general emergency services and response times, I think that's really what you're getting at as well. I was going to tack that on. It's not just hospital and medical services and accessing those. I mean, it's, it's police, it's what fire. I mean, we've seen our roadways get clogged and nobody can pass in either direction. So it doesn't matter if you have your sirens on, you're still not getting through. So I would agree with both of those and sort of detail those out a little bit more. Yeah.
And I fully trust staff to write the letter, and I'm looking forward to reading it after.
Who was next on this end? Councilmember Henderson? What do you like to add, subtract, edit?
I agree with all of these. I really appreciate the comments related to workforce housing and just a mix of different types of employee types or family types or different types of units to house folks year round. I do think it would be beneficial in our letter where we provide, sort of areas within these bullet points where we think there can be improvements. If there are also things that we generally support, it would be good to call those out as well. I think it would also just make it, potentially received a little bit better. That we're not only being critical and harsh.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do as well. Vice Mayor Zabriskie?
I'm fine with what staff's recommending and delegating to them responsibility for drafting and delivering the letter without without needing our review. It's interesting that the dormitory housing reminds me that in the state of California, it's illegal for a landlord to discriminate against families. The prime example being a couple who are about to have a baby. A landlord can't evict them because they're about to have a child. And here, it's almost as if the villages at Palisades has decided to address that by making their new housing inimitable to the family.
Interesting. Thank you.
Just an observation.
Good one. Councilmember Romack, anything to add to this letter?
Yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Henderson's, comments identify what we support. I think collaboration is key, and we're all one region. And so I think, thinking that way is very important. And, to think that also goes into thinking about the impacts regionally. So it's not just within Eastern Placer, it's also within Truckee, but also, how do we address these issues more as a region? I will say the workforce housing, I know this was in our staff report, supporting a more mix of unit types. I will say that's one I'm less supportive of just because we just took action at our last meeting for a developer program that was really incentivizing smaller unit types with the knowledge that that is what we are lacking in our region. So while I understand there are a variety of types of people that need housing, including families, we also know we need a lot more of these smaller unit types in our region. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if a lot of the units are smaller units. That would just be one observation as I've been thinking about this. And then lastly, also looking at the positive, I do also, and this goes with collaborating and IDing the positive or identifying the positive of Palisades Tahoe did take big steps this past winter to address some of the issues. So parking reservations, while yes, not everybody was happy with that system, we did see a reduction in traffic. So again, acknowledging that steps have been taken. And again, so just the collaboration mindset, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and just to remind you, we did approve 1 and 2 bedroom in addition to studios in that developer program, and I think just in terms of what we've seen so far, we're seeing primarily just dorms and studios. I mean, I don't even think there was mention of any 2 bedroom at all. So I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, just having slightly more variety maybe would be nice. Great. So
And again, I
yep.
feel like the dormitory style housing could be really, really cost effective and useful, especially for like a seasonal type worker, right? But if they're moving towards more year-round facilities and they're going to have, I don't know, managers of the adventure, whatever it's being called, right? Those could be people who have families who just, so.
It's both.
It's both, yeah.
Absolutely. So seeing no disagreement and mostly cohesiveness on directing staff here, I think we're good to go. Yeah, and I'm sure this letter will, get vetted at a number of different levels by staff, and I'll take a look at it before we sign off on it and try to reflect all of your opinions as best as we can. Good? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for bringing it to us so quickly and for being aware of it as well so quickly. Okay. Council member reports and then closed session. Let's try to wrap this up. Councilmember Henderson, you've been gone the longest, so give us the short version.
Oh, God. I was going to say nothing to report over the past 2 weeks.
Perfect. Good.
So, yes, we'll keep it at that.
Vice Mayor Zabriskie.
Attended the mayor-manager lunch. Talked about defensible space, common issues, and homelessness. Attended the Homeless Advisory Committee where we had a presentation by the expert on our long-range plan to reduce homelessness. Some of the highlights are out of 218 homeless in our region between Truckee and the North Shore, there's a gap in services for about 78 people that needs to be filled. We had a cost comparison of what it costs simply responding to homelessness versus prevention. $3.1 million is the estimate of how much is spent on the homeless. Preventing homelessness would cost $2 million and over in the first year, and then 1.8 million in succeeding years. So you'd have more than $1 million savings if you could prevent homelessness, provide the services and housing. Just following up on that, the profile of homeless is mostly white males. 75% of the homeless suffer some kind of disability. 40% have experienced domestic violence. 65% of the homeless are from right here in Placer, Nevada County. Attended Good Morning Truckee. Lynn Baumgartner made an excellent, presented an excellent summary of our housing programs. For anyone that wants a quick 10-minute summary, I highly recommend they look at her presentation to the Good Morning Truckee. I made a presentation to Golden Seniors on the Housing Advisory Committee's efforts, and then also appeared in front of the Rec and Park District on that same issue in regards to the vet center. There was I attended the River Revitalization Subcommittee on Economic Vitality, received reports on preferred land uses and uses of the 5 different zones or 6 different zones within the area being considered for redevelopment and river restoration. Also report from our expert economist on his interviews of property owners and business owners within the area. Many actually responded in a positive way, open to considering redevelopment. That's it.
Councilmember Romack.
The highlight was Sunday's AYSO soccer kickoff. My 4-year-old is playing soccer and just so much fun. I love our community and just every event is just filled with joy. And my son was so excited he had to wear a soccer jersey to school the next day. So just thank you to all the volunteers who organized that.
Councilmember Klofstad.
So my only meeting over the last 2 weeks was the Biomass Task Force, and so a couple of updates there. North Star actually just purchased their boiler system, and they're starting piping work next month. They expect to be online by the winter of winter, spring of 2025 or early 2026. So I'm really excited to see that. That'll be really great for our community to see that woody biomass plant in production and action. I understand we're putting the finishing touches on our SBC scope. So I'm excited to see that move forward as well to continue our own quest towards a woody biomass facility. And then TTCF will be doing a survey to gather data on what the community understands about woody biomass so that we can try to do some education on what it is not, assuage some of those fears of the unknown. That's it.
Thank you. Other than the Palisades meeting, we had a Visit Truckee Tahoe board meeting. In general, lodging industry performed quite well in July, forecasting a fairly decent August. Most are down a bit on rate, so prices coming down, but occupancy increasing with significantly more last minute bookings. And Visit Truckee Tahoe website traffic is up about 79% year over year, with a ton of lodging referrals coming through the new booking engine. So really an attempt by Visit Truckee Tahoe to sort of capture more internal leads, and proving quite successful. We're embarking on a new website redesign and all sorts of other cool things that they've got in the works. And then I believe you all received invitations to the first ever VTT annual celebration, which will be Saturday, September 14th up at the Alder Creek Adventure Center. And if you could join us, that would be great. And if you can't, we will miss you. But with that, that's all I have to report, and we will adjourn to closed session and then to our next council meeting on September 10th. Thank you.
If you could just announce the closed session items.
Oh, yes. Is this new?
We're always supposed to do it.
Oh, got it. Okay. We are adjourning to closed session with item 9.1, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, one case, and then 9.2, conference with real property negotiators on property APN 019-130-004-000. Is that sufficient, Mr. Morris? Thank you. Public comment? Seeing none. Adjourning.